All right, welcome to Defense Diaries. I'm your host, Bob Mata, and this is our continuing coverage of State of Indiana versus Richard M. Allen. This is day 16, and it was another just action-packed day in court. I had a relatively long day. I'm kind of in that cycle now where it's wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. Let me just give you an example. So I've been here so long that when I put my phone on to hook my directions, my driving directions on, it's now calling my work the Carroll County Courthouse. That's popping up as my job, my place of work. That's how long I've been here, and it's been quite an experience. I've told a bunch of people that sit around me and I talk to daily, other creators, friends of mine. I've tried a lot of cases and I did it for a long time. And this is the first time I've ever sat on this side of the bar, on the gallery side of it, and observed a full trial. And it's an interesting experience. I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot. It's different. It's really hard when you're kind of sitting there and you hear objections and you're thinking in your head, well, this is what I would rebut that objection with. This would be the answer that I would give in response to the state's objection. And and it's kind of hard to like not write a note and try to pass it and be like, hey, this is your argument here, this is what you should be doing. But it's been a really fascinating experience to sit on the other side of it and just kind of watch it unfold. It's been quite an experience. So I know that my better half, who I hope is going to be joining me at some point, she might be tied up doing this or that, taking care of everything else in our lives while I'm out here taking care of this. And she's taking care of this too. She's doing all the duties. So uh, I could not be more grateful to my beautiful wife, who I am very excited to go see tomorrow, along with my beautiful kids. So, as soon as I'm out of court tomorrow, I'm in the car, I'm back home. I'm going to probably get on, do that live, give you guys that Saturday court update that we all love. Who doesn't love court on Saturday, right? What's better than court on Saturday? So, last time I stayed because I was going to meet them all up at Great America, which we did to go to Fright Fest. I think tomorrow I'm gonna probably just hit it straight from court and do the live from the house in the comfort of my own home and give you guys what I saw and observed and wrote during the course of the day tomorrow. So I don't know where you guys got. I know where I sent Allie to, uh, like in terms of my notes, and hopefully she had a decent time reading them. I was really trying to print carefully, and I was really trying to write quickly. I'm not a fast writer. Like I really wish that at some point in my life that sexism didn't exist and that I had basically taken shorthand, but it seemed like back because I'm very aged. So back then, they didn't have boys taking shorthand because it was such a sexist society we lived in. They only had women or girls doing it. When it turns out it would have been very, very helpful to me to be able to do that in situations like this. So I struggle bust through it. And I've been trying to print as opposed to cursive because my wife really, really struggles reading my cursive. It's I've sent my notes off to Sleuthy in the hopes that she'd be able to get through and transcribe them for me. Um, but she is a busy gal as well. She's got a full-time job and she does all that she does, and I don't know how she does it, but she does. Just another amazing person that always has my back when I need it. So, uh, kind of how my day went, got in there, had the morning session. We had some pretty interesting witnesses in the morning. Uh, I, the second witness who I know whose name Brad, like when Brad put her on the stand, he forgot to ask for her to spell her last name. It sounded like DeWeaver. I couldn't be certain about it. I tried asking some people around me. I don't think many people caught it. I want to say that it was DeWeaver. It was something like that. He was, and Allie went through her testimony with you, um, and she was really pretty interesting. She was essentially, uh, she was Walla's supervisor at Centurion, and she gave a lot of insight into the kind of the mental health side of the prison system, even though they're a third party vendor and they're not state employees. I certainly make the argument that they are in fact state agents, even though they're not employed by the Department of Corrections per se. They're paid by them because of the contract and the access that they have to the inmates. And when you start kind of looking at what was going on with Walla, with the amount of Delphi coverage that she was very, very deeply involved in, you have to really question ethically her ability to be able to be the person that was treating Richard Allen. I mean, you cannot have a situation where you have a psychologist who is treating an inmate who is a pretrial detainee who has reached a conclusion, her own conclusion, pre-trial, based on coverage and her own research and her going out to the bridge and her digging into Kagan Klein on a database that only she could have access to. It's not something that we could pull up. And then she's sitting there treating Richard Allen, talking to him about his case, even though she says, "Oh, I was just giving him words of support, letting him know that there were people out there that supported him and, all those kind of things." The reality is I don't care about any of that because when it boils down to an issue where she has to make a determination whether or not she thinks he's malingering or feigning, as she puts it, about his psychosis, if she's reached a decision in her mind that she believes that he's guilty of this crime, which way do you think that she's going to fall when she's got to make that decision, that close decision on whether or not she thinks this guy's full of shit and he's faking? Well, obviously she's going to lean on the side of faking, which she did. And then at some point, I guess she thought better of it somewhere down the road. But at that point, who knows? Was the damage done? Does anybody really think that the words, uh, that were used in that particular statement? I mean, does anybody really think that Richard Allen used the words lying in wait? And Rick's a smart guy, but that's not what a normal person says in terms of that. That's like something that like a professional or a law enforcement agent says they were lying in wait, or a dramatic screenwriter or a novelist. It's not something that normal people say. They would have said, "Yeah, I was hiding, waiting for somebody to come, not lying in wait." So, there's things like that that really kind of have me questioning how much or how little of what was said to Rick Allen or what was suggested to Rick Allen in terms of that particular statement, because that's the only one out of 61 or whatever it was. I don't think it added up to that number, to be honest with you. Whatever we heard and whatever we read and whatever we heard people reading, things that they claim that he said, that was the only one that had any specifics. And that particular confession has become the heart of the state's case. And I'm going to remind you that during opening statements, Andy Baldwin said it unequivocally. And I hope that the jury was taking notes, even though the fact is that an opening statement is not evidence, but it's the roadmap for which way the state's case is going to go and which way the defense's case is going to go. And what Andy Baldwin said is that I want you to keep pay very, very close attention to their case, because at some point during the middle of their case, they're going to change theories on you. And you know what happened? Is the state in the middle of their case changed theories on them. And they have put all their eggs into the white van basket. Their entire case revolves around the white van. It revolves around the fact that they now are stating that they believe that the girls were killed at 2:32 or 2:33 at the time that Libby's phone last moved. So, because it matches up with when Brad Weber is claiming that he got home from the Subaru plant and that Richard Allen saw the van. So that's their case right now, and right now what we're seeing is the defense scrambling to rebut it. And what we saw today was a lot of Brad Weber action. A lot of Brad Weber action. There was just an awful lot about Brad Weber. He has really become the focal point for both sides on this. And from the defense perspective, the reason they're doing it is to rebut this proposition that Brad Weber left home and or left work and drove straight home. They're saying, no, you didn't. You changed your story, buddy. Your story before, when you interviewed with a Fed, Agent Poole, and this goatee that Allison went through his testimony, he was a Stonewall. I kept writing in my notes. I'm like, he's a Stonewall witness. And kind of the way that whole testimony went down. And I had asked Allison in my notes, and I'm sure she did if she was able to read it. I wanted her to explain just how difficult it is for a defense attorney to direct a cop, okay? Because they are not friendly witnesses to us. We can't cross them, meaning we can't ask leading questions. So we have to direct them, which is allow them to go through somewhat of a narrative led by the attorney directing them through it. It's a very awkward task. It's a very difficult task. It takes some considerable skill where you're really trying to cross that person, but you have to do it in the form of a direct examination, because that's where you're asking more open-ended questions. Whereas with cross-examination, you're asking very pointed questions, leaving them very little room to operate in terms of their answers. You want to try to limit them to a yes or no answer. You want to really guide a cross examination so that you're in control of it, not allowing the witness to take control of the dialogue that's coming out of their mouth. So, uh, ultimately, what happened with this guy, and it's pertinent to bring it up again, because what happens later in the day, and the judge makes a certain ruling later in the day related to his partner in canvassing and interviewing witnesses in the first couple of weeks of the investigation, that Agent Poole and the defense trying to get him in. And ultimately, they had to rely on what they call a TUI request, which is where you've got any kind of information that you're trying to use during litigation that has been produced by a federal agency, whether it be the FBI, Department of Justice, whoever it may be, and whether it's documents, whether it's a witness that you want to come in and testify, you have to make a request and you have to deal with the feds if they're not a party to the action, which in this case, the feds are not. So they have to deal with the feds in terms of coordinating with them, get the okay from the feds to say, hey, we need this guy to come in. We need him to testify. We want to issue a subpoena. And that's the process that they've been going through. They issued the subpoena. Ultimately, it sounded like they had it worked out, but it sounds that Agent Poole has some kind of undisclosed medical condition right now that they don't think that he can fly. Uh, and yeah, like Weber definitely has meth mouth. He was doing this thing the whole time. It was crazy. It was crazy. It looks like me when I have like an on in my mouth and I'm trying to like I'm rotating it around. Uh so it's like so ultimately sorry about that little aside there. I saw a comment. I should turn the comments off. They throw me off. But I like reading what you guys have to say. I care about you guys. I want to see what you're saying. It's important to me. I like the feedback. So with this TUI request, it turns out like he can't travel. So the defense had said, look, we've talked to a judge here in Carroll County. The judge is willing to come in and help you set up the Zoom, and we will have this testimony take place via Zoom and here in the courtroom. We can put it on the big screen. Everybody can see him. We can question him. It's as if he's here, and he's a Fed. We trust him. He's not going to have notes behind the camera, reading notes. It's like that. That's the thing you always work about. Like when you worry about when COVID hit and they shut down the courts and then they reopened them, and all the lawyers are really doing Zoom initially. So it was a very weird world we were living in. And the one thing I said, I love Zoom for status hearings, meaning you're just going in, you're getting a new date, you're letting the judge know where you're at in the discovery process. Do we have any issues? Are we going to be filing any motions? Like your typical status hearing. Those were great because that saved us a huge amount of time having to get in the car and then have to go, drive over there, go in for 30 seconds, get back in the car, drive back home. It eats up like an hour, hour and a half for a 2 minute, 3 minute time in front of the judge. So like I loved it for that. What I didn't love it for, the concept of it was horrifying to me, was the situation wherein we are having hearings and or trials and you're having an evidentiary hearing where you have a witness on the stand. I'm like, that can never happen. I mean, you have to be able to view this witness. You have to be able to view their body language. You have to view everything about them because when you're trying to judge the credibility of a witness, you have to take all of that into account. It's not just the words that are coming out of their mouths, right? It's are they looking over to the state for help? It's like I'm going to call a spade, but whenever Gull wants McClellan to object to something because she thinks it's objectionable, she looks over there and makes serious eye contact with him and kind of just gazes over there or glares until he says, "Oh, objection." So, like I know I can't be the only one seeing that. That is definitely going on. Anytime that she feels the defense is going too far afield, anytime she feels that they're floating into dangerous territory in terms of violating the motion in limine about third party suspects and all the words that they can't say during the trial, she'll give a peek. She'll give a peek over to the state's table saying, "What are you doing? It's a good time for an objection." Not saying it, but saying it with their eyes. So, like it's just, but that's not just a Judge Gull thing. Like it's like most judges are stateside judges. They really are. Like that is typically the judge track. If you look at the statistics, a vast majority of judges have gone through the prosecutor route. You'll see, like, if you were to pull up the statistics, you would see that it's a huge discrepancy between defense attorney judges, former defense attorney judges, and former prosecutor judges. It's vastly different. And funny enough, I mean, I've had some of the best judges that I've been in front of were former prosecutors, because I think that many of them go a long way in terms of trying to be what they're supposed to be, which is unbiased and not leaning one way or another. But you'll get those judges, and you can always tell. You can tell by the way that they rule on things. You can tell by their past decisions. You can tell in terms of their sentencing. You can tell how they lean. It's like they have a record, and their records are public record. We can always look and see what a judge's record is in terms of how they operate. And Judge Gall is very much a state-sided, and I thought that I had read that she was a defense attorney. She'll be one of the that happens. That happens a lot of times, because I think defense attorneys, when they get on the bench, oftentimes feel that they have to overcompensate with the fact that they were a defense attorney, and they don't want to seem biased, so they'll kind of favor the state as well. So it's always a tough battle. I mean, defense attorneys, quite frankly, are they're pretty stout in terms of being prepared to deal with the reality of what the judicial system is, which is, it's an uphill battle. I say it all the time over here on this channel. It's being on the defense side of this is it's a tough fight. You got the power of the state that you're fighting. You got the power and the resources of the state, and it's a tough fight. And I think the other thing, that if anybody being honest about what they're hearing from the observers in this trial, and Brad Rosie and Andrew Baldwin took a lot of shit coming into this thing. People besmirching their character, besmirching their ability to practice law, besmirching what they do. And I kept telling people, I'm like, these guys have been doing it 50 years collectively. These guys are good defense attorneys. Richard Allen got really lucky that he got these two guys in particular, and it's bearing itself out in that court every single day. These guys are ready. These guys are damn fine trial attorneys, and they're putting the state to the test. You're seeing it every day, and that's in light of just the horrific decisions that Judge Gull has made in terms of evidentiary issues in this case, and what is going to be allowed. And so I applaud them as a fellow defense attorney. I think they're doing a magnificent job under extreme duress. I want to be kind and say that's how I'm going to term it: extreme duress. So I think that Allie probably left off with Max Baker. I'm going to guess. I think that is where she must have left off. I think my last notes to her were Max Baker. He is the young IU grad, recent grad, law policy kid. It's what he got his degree in, law policy. And he's been working in Brad Rosie's office for the past 2 years as a legal intern. Brad's got him doing all the grunt work. We need interns like that. We love interns like that to do the minutia. It's so important. It's so critical. Can't do this job without somebody to help you do the minutia, and Max has been that guy. And he was really tasked with putting together the evidence of the conditions of Richard Allen's confinement, which was not easy, because when you're trying to go through this discovery that they were tendered, and they complained about it often, and loudly about just how disorganized it was when they were receiving it. And remember, never forget, when they were removed from the case, they had to ship it all back. So all the work they had done organizing this 30 terabytes or whatever it was of discovery, they then had to get it back, and the state had shuffled the deck again. So now they have to go through and try to figure out what's what, going through everything, all of it, to make sure that you, number one, had what you had to begin with. Number two, that they didn't try to stick anything in, needle in a haystack style, so that you can't find it or that you'll miss it because it's buried. And it's a massive process. And these guys said that they were going to be ready to go to trial. They said it relating back to January, they said it in May, and then they were ready. They were ready in October. And this, like, I know for trial observers, like, I think at this point that you guys would understand that the process is slow. The discovery process is slow. The motion phase is slow. It takes time. You got to have the hearings. Everybody's got to disclose all the discovery. They have to go through it. The defense needs an opportunity to do their own investigation, and that all takes time. Like, you typically don't get big cases going to trial in warp speed. So, and I've had many lives about this exact conversation with respect to that very, very dangerous gambit of making a speedy trial demand. Because when you make it, it's not just forcing the state to go very quickly before they feel comfortable going to trial in terms of preparation, but it also forces the defense to go probably before they feel completely comfortable going. So, they've had to do both sides have had to do a massive amount of work to get ready for this thing. Because, like, you see it, well, I take that back. You're hearing about it. But when you see a case like this, I mean, the state put in excess of 300 exhibits of all variety, and all those exhibits, you got to figure out how to get them in. Like, one of the biggest challenges in any trial is trying to figure out how to get your evidence in, or in the alternative, trying to figure out how to keep it out. So, and those are major, major hurdles that you have to clear, especially when you've got a defense who has been shut down from bringing in third party defense, and who essentially needs to attack law enforcement, but they have Nick McClellan in a decent strategic move, piecemealing his witnesses by only allowing them to testify at certain times about certain things, so that he can then turn around when the defense starts to get into, hey, you know how shitty this investigation was, how all the things that you didn't do that you should have did. So, like, when they start getting into that, Nick will say, hey, you know what, these guys are talking about a bunch of stuff that I didn't bring up on direct. They're beyond the scope. And the judge has been sustaining those objections, which means that they have to move on. So, they're facing all these challenges, and I think that the case ended a little bit sooner than they thought it would in terms of the state's case in chief. So they had to scramble a bit to get their witnesses lined up, because it's like, when you're trying to set up a trial like this and you have multiple experts who probably are coming in from different states and have many different cases they're working on, and they have their own practices doing whatever they're doing. So you have to coordinate with these witnesses, and you say, okay, this is kind of our trial dates, and I'm going to try to give you the best idea I can as to when we think we're going to need you. Because remember, I mean, you have to take into consideration the costs. You have to say, okay, well, we don't necessarily have the money to put you up for a week and just, say, hey, man, we're going to fly you in. We're going to put you up in Lafayette in a hotel. We're going to pay for you to eat. We're going to pay for your travel. And then, sometime during that week, we're going to call you. No, they try to narrow it down to a couple of days and say, okay, we think that we're probably going to call you. You're going to fall somewhere on Monday or Tuesday, depending on a lot of different factors. and you just hope for the best, right? And so when things go a little faster and you have to move witnesses up because Judge Go is not going to be happy when the state rests if the defense isn't ready to jump on in and say, hey, look, we're not ready to go. Our witnesses aren't lined up. She's not going to like that. So they have to get their witnesses ready, and they probably have to change the order in which they wanted their witnesses to testify. So those are all the kind of mechanics that you have to deal with when you're preparing for a trial like this. It's like when we're in court, you're seeing some version of a finished product, and there is no such thing as a perfect trial. You're never going to get a trial where both sides are going to get everything right. That's just not how they work. You're going to get tech mixed functions. You're going to get witnesses that don't show up. You're going to get witnesses that can't show up when you needed them to show up. You're going to get all the different hiccups that happen during a trial, because you know why? We're dealing with human beings, and human beings are not perfect. So they had Max on. We had this extended break. That was when I ran out. And again, Max Baker was the one that was putting together the incel videos, and that's not incel like people think Brian Koberger is. It's in cell, meaning in his cell. They had that camera that runs 24/7, and then they had the camcorder guys who were following him around everywhere he went in the jail recording. Now, the issue with the camcorder is that it had both audio and video, which, quite frankly, was quite a surprise to me. I was not aware of that, because the testimony during the first safekeeping hearing was that that camcorder did not have audio, because Rosie asked that question. Because remember, they were filming Richard Allen when he was speaking with his lawyers, where they had faced his chair towards the window and they're filming him there. So, and my what I had heard was that he, like, at least, and maybe I'm misremembering. We've gone through a lot of stuff, but I could have sworn that the testimony at that hearing from either Gallipo or another person that worked in that prison, I think it was only Gallipo, is that camcorder did not have sound. I'm going to go on 90% on that he said that. So I was a little shocked to hear now that they're saying that it did in fact have sound, because I had a real problem with them not only videotaping counsel with their client, and which is absolutely supposed to be a private setting so they can prepare their client for trial without the prying eyes and ears of the state getting all up in their shit. So when I heard that today, I was like, wow, man, uh, that's not what they said before. They said that there was no audio. So, and it turns out that audio becomes a real problem. So we were supposed to see some of this horrific video that was going to tell us and show us what was going on during these 13 months, but they were going to condense it down to April through June. And I think for the incel, it was going to be to the beginning of July. Now, July, or the incel, has no sound. It's just straight video. And the incel has timestamps on it. So the issue that they were having with the camcorders is that for some reason did not have timestamps on it. So poor young Max was out there for months trying to figure out, reading through the tea leaves a bit, starting with, okay, well, they put this in a folder with a month on it. So I'm going to start there. And then he'd try to whittle it down by matching the companion statements in terms of the suicide companions that were writing their statements and their observations. Okay, oh, he's eating his feces here. Okay, oh, he's eating his feces there. So he was trying to match it with things that he was reading in reports and things that he was hearing, and so he was trying to match it to the video. And when McClelland asked him a couple questions in one of his preliminary questions, he said, um, he asked, and this is after lunch, so this is stuff that I don't think that you guys, well, maybe this is right before lunch. Uh, he asked him, "How did you determine the time frame of the video?" So Max kind of went through what I just told you. Like, this is what I did. We got the receipt from Discovery. It provided me with ranges. I then started digging through the statements, Dr. Walla's notes, and I was trying to put the pieces together by using that. And he was like, I was really able to nail down some type of time frame. I'm not going to be able to give you exact dates, but I can certainly give you months. And as long as those fell within the months that Judge Gull was okay with, which are the months that he was experiencing psychosis, Gull was like, I'm going to make it, they're admissible. And so, um, there, Rosie stands up after his preliminary questions, has the flash drive in, starts walking up there, and then because he had asked one question where he said, "Oh, well, did you did were you able to are you confident? Are you confident on your dates?" He's like, "I'm pretty sure." He used the words "pretty sure." So then McClelland sits down, says he has this continuing objection. Rosie starts walking up with the flash drive, and then Judge Gull says, Hold on a minute." She's like, what she said is, "I've approved for the camcorder with the audio and the video," which she got rid of the audio because I think Allie went through that with you. They had said that that's hearsay, which it's not. It would have been state of mind. It would have gone to his state of mind. Their present sense impression. There's a lot of exceptions to the hearsay rule that applied and should have allowed for that to get in. But that she said, I'm giving you the time frame of April through June for the camcorder videos. And what your witness here just said is that he's not sure. So in light of that, I don't feel comfortable allowing this video to get shown to the jurors until we have that nailed down. I need to know before I'm allowed. And Rosie's always gracious. Like, Rosie never loses a shit ever in there. Always says thank you, Your Honor. No matter how egregious the sustained objection may be, he never loses his shit. He's always just boop, he's right on. That's a real skill to not allow it to get to you. It really is. It's like, just think of it in a real world context. Like, if you were in an argument with somebody, and you're debating something, and you had a third party that was listening to it and was sitting there chiming in all the time, and then saying, "Oh, I agree with the person that you're arguing with," like, over and over and over. Eventually, you'd get really irritated with that third party who's constantly agreeing with the other person who is wrong, and then try to imagine, like, just keeping your cool, right? Like, that's a really, really tough way to go. So ultimately, what they decide to do is that they're going to table Max Baker. They're going to table the entire video display of these various dates, condensed down of just the horrific things that was going on in the cell of Richard Allen over the period of time from April through June. So at that point, we go take lunch. Oh, and just as a little bit of an aside, Kathy Allen left the courtroom. Like, she was going to leave the courtroom for those videos, and she did leave. And the reason she left is because, as you can imagine, for Richard Allen, having to watch those videos of what he went through for part of 13 months will probably be pretty tough for him to watch. I don't know if you could try to put yourself in the position of having to sit in a court of law with a gallery full of people, with a jury box full of people, with a judge on a bench, with a table full of prosecutors, with a repugnant amount of law enforcement in that room, in a real show of power. And like, make no bones about it, like the amount of cops that are in that room is insane. Because you have to. I'll get back to that with your defense team, and then most importantly, to you, to Richard Allen, his wife, and they're going to play these videos of him losing his shit, of him doing unthinkable things that are really hard to even contemplate. Like they're so hard to contemplate that I can't think of anybody that I know personally that has ever gone through anything like this, and it's on display for the world to see. And I'm talking not just like the like all of it, not just the feces eating and spreading it all over your body and masturbating in the middle of the cell and just all of it, all of it, you know. Um I think that would probably be PTSD inducing. So I mean it's going to be a really challenging thing for him to sit through it either way. And again, um his wife wasn't going to be in that room so as not to have her husband feel that pain that he knows that his wife is sitting there having to watch this. So yeah. So that was just a little bit of a side. So yeah, Kathy's not gonna whenever they play those, Kathy's not gonna be sitting in the courtroom for it. Um, all right. So the fourth witness that the defense called was an older gentleman named Brad Heath, like the Heath Bar, Heath, and he 70-year-old gentleman, retired, former exterminator, worked for a little company called Reliable Extermination. Sweet old guy, just walked up there. Your typical nice old Midwestern guy, his shirt tucked in, had some nice slacks on, little plaid shirt. Looked like any one of our grandfathers, right? I mean, he was that guy. He gets up there and starts testifying. Um, Lives just outside of Delphi, and that he had retired from his exterminating business as he was sitting on the stand. But back in 2017, that he was still working for Reliable Exterminators. And then he had several customers that were regulars. And one of those was the Andersons of the Anderson farm, which you've heard about during the course of this trial. It's one of the properties uh, in very close proximity to the trails and the bridge. And on this particular day, he had a couple of jobs that day. He had one uh, just on the outskirts, on the west, a little west of Delphi, and then he had one in Delphi proper at the Anderson farm. And So what he did, um, so he had a job that was west of Delphi, so he drove through Delphi that morning. And then he said that he ended up coming back. And so the question was asked is, what did you do a scan of the small pack building, which is one of the buildings on the farm? And he's exterminating rodents. So, obviously there's grains in there. They can't have a bunch of rats or any other kind of rodents in there eating their grains, infesting it with feces, all the things that we don't want to be in our grains and the food that we eat. So he goes out there and he does a couple of scans. He does 2 scans that day. So he's out there around the bridge at first. He does his first scan at 146, and then he does a second scan at 206. And they asked him, how did you know that? He's like, well, I get a printout of when I did my scans. And so the defense entered that in as exhibit AAA. And then they asked him, well, why'd you go get that record? And he said, well, he's like, the reason I went and got that record is it because of this vehicle that I saw that day. And he saw it at 8:45 a.m. in the morning. And he saw it parked real close to what he calls the old CPS building. And he said it was about halfway down the road before the curve, because there's a curve. So 300 runs here, then it curves up, and then that's where the old CPS building. He says, I saw it up there, but it was actually parked a few feet off the road, and it was on the west side of the road. And he's like, and he said, well, can you describe what the car looked like? He's like, well, said it was kind of a dark blue vehicle, but it was older, and the paint was faded, so it was like a he's like he's like I thought it was from maybe the 80s or in the 90s. Because when he first testified to it, I'm like, oh shit, we're getting another Mercury Comet guy. My head's always like in there. I'm like, oh my god, another Mercury Comet guy. We got the Mercury Comet there at 8:45 in the morning. They're sitting on the it's like, no, it's a dark blue vehicle, older, faded. And his quote was, they had asked him, and I think this was I didn't write it down. I think Brad did this one. No, I take it. Yeah, no, I think it was Andrew actually. He said, "Well, the reason I I went and got my records because that car just looked out of place." So we had a couple of this just looked out of place witnesses today, and Brad Heath was the first one. He's like, there was just something about it, and he did not strike me at all as a person that has flights of fancy, that is a nosy Nelly, that is just, like he just struck me as an old timer that was out there doing his job. And he's like, well, shit, what's that car doing out there? Something don't seem right about it. I'm going to take note of it. So he did. And he says he said that when he left, he said he was traveling southbound, leaving the small pack building, and then he saw the vehicle was still there when he left. So he sees it at 8:45, and then we know he leaves sometime after 206 Eastern, and this car, which he says just looked out of place, still there. And so they ask him, well, were you ever contacted by law enforcement? He's like, no, no, I went in about a week after to the sheriff's department. And then, I told them what I saw. They didn't seem overly interested. He said and then I spoke to them a few times after that. And then he he said, "And the last time, when's the last time you spoke to him?" He said, "Well, now I didn't know if he meant the Fugitive movie or the Fugitive show because he said the old Fugitive show." And he's like, "I was watching it." And he said, "I saw a car that looked an awful lot like the vehicle I saw." It's like, damn, that looks just like the car I saw. Because he said, he's like, "I'm not a car guy." So he's like, I couldn't tell you a make or a model or any of that stuff. He's like, "That's not my bag." It's like, that's why I don't do it. Like when he first got into testify, I'm always trying to guess like what the witnesses kind of like what they put him on for. Like what are they trying to get out of him? And originally I'm like, "Oh, he's a pesticide guy. He's the van." Right. I'm like, "He's a van guy. They all have vans, right? Big rats on the top of them or a big cockroach on the top of the van." So no, he wasn't the van guy. He was this odd car. And he says, I saw this car and it looked an awful lot like the vehicle I saw. So then they enter in defendant's exhibit BBB, which is a photo of a car. So Baldwin goes up to him. He says, "Hey, does this look similar?" And he says, "Yeah, pretty similar." It's like, "Well, what looks similar about it?" He's like, "Well," he's like, "it's like the kind of the sharp edges. It was like angular, this car." He's like, "It looks pretty similar to it." So then Diener, she says, "Well, I've got a preliminary question." And she says, she pulls up another picture, and oh no, actually, she picks up uh, the picture that Baldwin had up, and she says, "Does this car look like the vehicle you saw that day?" And he says, "Well, as much as possible," because I have nothing else. So, and then she asked, "Was that vehicle? So that vehicle was not parked at the CPS lot?" He says, "No, it was parked near it off the road." So that was it. So that was Brad Heath. So what he brings to the table is this mystery car. We've got a mystery car that is in the area of the trails starting at 8:45 up until and never leaves until 2:06. Now, the one question that wasn't asked, and I don't know if it was just to be assumed because it wasn't asked, is if you saw anybody in the car. So unless I missed it, but I was really trying to be on point with my slow ass handwriting today, not to miss any. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna really work hard today to make sure I get all these questions down. And I don't remember hearing that come out. Just don't. So the defense then calls their next witness, who is uh, another older gentleman named David McCain. Now, if you followed this case at all, David McCain will probably be a familiar name. He is a gentleman who lives out on Carrollton Road for the past 24 years, and he lived out of state. They asked him if he grew up in Delphi. He's like, yeah, I was there for a long time, and then I lived out of state for a few decades, and then I moved back. Very active in the community. He's on various boards, charitable boards. He likes to be involved with improvement type projects. And so he was a part of a group that was working on the Monon High Bridge uh, improvement project. And so he was very familiar with the evolution of the High Bridge and the trails. He was instrumental. Oh, Salty, you have no idea. I was telling Barb McDonald today, I'm like, this portion of my finger is like dead. It's completely numb. It's been that way for like a week. And it's not even a blister. It's just like the meat's like numbed out. it's it's a lot of writing. It really is. It's like it's law school esque is what it is. That's what I feel like. Because like I couldn't type fast enough in law school, so I had to take notes on legal pads. It's like the torture they put you through in law school is exceptional. So McCain says that at some point, prior to the 13th of 2017, that you know, they had gotten the funds to improve the bridge, like the way that we see it today. With, they were going to remove the portion that kept tempting people to cross it. They're like, we have to, like, it's only a matter of times before somebody falls off that thing and dies. So we need to like the little barricade that we have up is not doing the trick. We're seeing too many kids out there. They keep crossing it. It's dangerous. It's way too dangerous. So, they ultimately do what they did, which is to, do all the engineering and make sure that they, engineer this thing properly so that there's a walkway out there and it goes to about the halfway point of what used to be the full bridge. And so the morning of the 13th, he actually had a meeting that was set up that day. And um that's like after that meeting is when he ends up going out to the bridge. So uh he's asked, have you ever walked the whole high bridge? And he says, oh yes, yes, many times. And then he's asked, were you on the trails that day? And he says, oh yeah. He's like, yes, I was. On 213 of 17. Says yes. And then Andy says, well, what time do you think you were out there? He says, he's like, I think it was sometime between like 2 and 4. And Andy says, well, when did you get to the park? He says, yeah, like I want to guess sometime like between 2 and 3 o'clock. And I think, I left sometime around 4. He says, well, where did you park? He's like, well, I parked on old Sherry's Lane. And Brad's like, okay. So is like, have you heard of Nietzsche's entrance? He's like, mm, I don't know if I've heard of that one. He's like, well, what about Mir's entrance? He's like, yeah, yeah. He's like, yeah, that's the same thing. So come to find out that Mir's entrance has multiple names. Sherry's Lane. So I think Sherry is one of the mirrors. So some people call it Sherry's Lane. It's the mirror's entrance. And then the Nietzsche's entrance, he says, is not that same entrance, but it's a different entrance. So I don't know, like that, like because we had an earlier witness say that the Nietzsche's entrance and the mirror's entrance were the same thing. So he gave a little, and I got to be honest with in terms of like knowledge of that area and this bridge, I'm kind of going with David McCain. And I have to say, like I had seen on the disgusting dark corners of the internet things about this David McCain guy that like people like, oh yeah, I think he was the guy. I mean, like this dude was like the sweetest old man you could ever want. Like there's like anybody who thought that guy had any part of this, like just like whoever in the history of like who's out there on the YouTubes or in Reddit, like trying to point a finger at this sweet old guy. Um, I wouldn't trust a goddamn word they say because like this guy ain't the guy. This guy was just like he likes to take photographs. Like he's like, oh, when he's talking about fence posts, he's like, I don't know, I just like those things. He takes pictures of fence posts and talks about this old oak tree that he loves to take pictures of every time he goes out there. Just a nice old guy. Um, so he gets parked and they say, are there any other places that you'd park? And he's like, well, it's like sometimes I'll park out by Centennial or the Mulberry Tree. And Andy didn't have them. Like, so what are those two areas? Because those have not entered the Delphi lexicon in terms of things that we care about trying to figure out all these parking places, right? So he says, on occasion I'll park over there, but I know on this day this is where I parked. So he says, when you parked, what did you see? Well, he said, I didn't see any other cars parked there. And Andy restates, so you got out there sometime between 2 or 3. He's like, yeah, sometime in between there. I honestly can't remember exactly what time it was, but it was definitely between those hours. And then he says, well, did you ever make it out to the high bridge? He says, oh yeah. Oh yeah. The high bridge, he says, is it's 852 feet long and 65 feet high. So now I know. I'm gonna take David McCain's numbers and I'm going to go to the bank with them. Like, I believe that bridge was exactly 852 feet long and 65 feet high, and I'll die on that hill. That's how credible I thought he was. And says, yeah, I was out there. I got out to the high bridge and I was taking some pictures. It was a beautiful day out. And then he said, and then Andy says, well, you know where that first platform is? He says, oh yeah, oh yeah. He says it's out over there on the right hand side if you're heading to the other side of the bridge, if you're coming in from the trail side. It was over to the right, and it was far enough out to where it was over the water. And then so Andy asks him, he's like, the water. He's like, is the water pretty clear? He's like, oh yeah. Yeah. He's like, if it hasn't rained, and the silt hasn't, been caused to run up into the water. He's like, it's very clear. He's like, you can see the rocks. And he's like, what about the fish? He's like, oh, I don't know. He's like, I'm not a fisherman. He's like, I like the rocks. So and Andy's like, oh, and Andy's just got this demeanor that's just super folksy. He just comes off like a really, like, it's like, I'm trying to think, like, Matlock's not it, because Matlock can get a little snarky in there. Andy's just, unless Skull's pissing him off, then sometimes he'll get a little. And I've seen Andy like twice during the trial. He's gotten a little excited with a couple of witnesses. And when I say excited, not like losing his shit excited, but like elevated pitch. You can sense that he's irritated with the witness, especially with Sarah Carbaugh. Like the whole Andy Baldwin, Sarah Carbaugh thing was something else. And look, she was an extraordinary witness, and I'm not saying extraordinary in a great way. Like she was something else. And I don't even know how to describe it. Like it was next level though. It was like a performance. Like the whole thing was like a performance. It was like she had mistaken and thought that there were cameras in that courtroom. like that's what it felt like. Like she was like, I am gonna go in there and crush my performance on the stand, and I'm gonna somehow parlay that into some kind of fame. Like it was like that's how I felt that witness was. Um, is who a hostile witness, Santini? You need to specify. There were definitely some hostile witnesses today. Like McCain certainly wasn't a hostile witness. The first guy that they called, the cop, that Auger uh, goatee, he was certainly hostile. I mean, he wasn't so much as hostile as he just was a stonewall. Like he got up there knowing he was never going to give them what they wanted, and he almost screwed it up. Oh man, when he refreshed his recollection the first time, he's like, "Yeah, is your recollection refreshed?" He said, "Yes." So then Andy asked him about the thing, and you could see him look over to McClellan. McClellan was not happy. Like his answer was supposed to be no. Because remember that when you refresh someone's recollection and you hand them a document to do so, whether it be a deposition, whether it be a police report regarding a statement they made, whatever the case may be, that you're not asking them, oh, did you just read that? And can you remember it to answer the question? What you're doing is you're handing them that, you're having them read it. And the concept is like, oh, that made me remember exactly. Now I'm actually going from my memory of what happened. It triggered a memory for me. So when you hear that refresh your recollection, understand there's a very, very distinct difference between those two things. Oh, good. She explained it too. But that's it. So like that it is that. So when you get somebody that you're like, because like if you're watching it as a layperson and you hear them say, "Yeah, my recollection's not refreshed," after they just read a piece of paper saying what you're trying to get them to say. That's why. Because if they're saying, "Well, yeah, I read it, but it didn't really trigger anything for me." I'm the like, "Yeah, I read what it just said, but I don't remember saying that." So that's the distinction. So, uh, and then Andy asked him, "Did you have your camera?" He says, "Oh yeah, yeah." He says, "I have a digital camera." And then he talks about, he's like, "There's an old oak tree that I like to look at and take pictures of." And then he says, "When you left the bridge, how long do you think you had been out there?" And he said, "Eh, like half an hour, something like that." And then they asked him, "Did you see anybody leaving the high bridge?" And he said, "I saw a couple." So again, we've got his time frame. He says he gets there sometime between 2 and 3, can't be on lock. And we're about to get to when he leaves. So in theory, David McCain was out there the whole goddamn time. So David McCain, like how is he out on the bridge unless it's after the girls were out there in 213 when the video's taken, and he doesn't see anybody. He doesn't see, because a couple, and this is the second witness that I've heard talking about a couple, and I don't know who this couple is. And couple means, yeah, yeah, it's my better half. Like I don't know why she's not on the live with me, but um she's like not here. I miss her. I'm so excited to see her tomorrow. And my kids. Can't wait to see my people. Um so but like we don't have him seeing Rayleigh Voorhees. We don't have him seeing, Brianne Wilbur and, the two little ones that are with them. We don't have him seeing Betsy Blair, like who walks the circuit 3 times. So like how do you do that? Like how does that happen? It's like this whole case is just quite a mystery to me. So Andy says, he spent the entire time out there. He was on the high bridge, the trails, taking pictures, and then when do you think you left? He says, "I think it was around 4 o'clock." And he says, "As I was walking out," which when he says this, I automatically think that we've gotten to the point where Derek German's been out there, like, and like there's people that are gathering. And so he says around 4 o'clock, and he says, "I was surprised by the number of people in cars by the Sherry's Lane, aka the mirrors entrance when I came out." And then he says, "I got in my car and left." And then he says, "Well, when you left, which way did you go?" He said, "When I left on old 300. Did you take a left or a right?" He's like, I can't remember." And then Andy tried to ask him, "Well, did you see anybody on the road?" McClellan objects. He's like, "Nah, he didn't remember. He'd be speculating. He didn't remember which way he turned." So Andy's like, "Okay, well, no matter which way you turned, did you see anybody on the road on 300? Because theoretically, if he's leaving at 4, at the same time Carbaugh's out there driving around, Same time she sees Muddy Bloody guy, right? Like 356, 357. He's like out there at the same time, theoretically around. So then he says, so then he tracks back a little bit and question, he says, when you were leaving, did you see anything else? He's like, well, he said there was a man who was shouting. He's like, he shouted at me. He's like, have you seen two girls? He said, I shouted back and I said, no. So then I got in the car and left. And then he said, when he's asked, when you were out on the trails on the bridge, did you hear anything unusual at all? So when you're out at around whatever, 3:15, 3:30, because it sounds like he would have gotten out there at 3:30. He's like, did you hear anything at all unusual? Screaming, yelling, rustling, running, anything? Because I was out there again today for the drone action. And again, it was very quiet. And the drone is very quiet. And I walked down the nature trail to get down to the creek. And I was walking, and I had our beautiful humans, our beautiful benefactors who have gifted us this lovely home to stay in for this entire trial. And they're also our drone operators. So Ryan and Rachel met me out there, just sweetest people you'll ever know, you ever want to meet, just the nicest people. It's like I'm so fortunate, the amount of amazing people that we've met through this thing here, this YouTubes. And I just love when I get to meet people in person. And so that was the first. I've been out here for a couple weeks, and they've been trying to coordinate with me, and I'm busy as hell. And they're super sweet about, like, hey, we don't want to, like, we want to meet you, we want to hang with you, but we know you're busy as hell. So they're super considerate. And then so I was thrilled to get to spend some time with them today. And I really wanted to eat with them, but I had told Vinny I'd come back and get on there again tonight. So, because I think we were talking about sushi. By the way, guys, if you're watching, I did hit Mount Fuji. I did grab some sushi, but we're gonna do a meal. But so Ryan and Rachel were out there with me. Ryan is an amazing guy who is quite the gun expert. Um, I think he said he was a master armor. Like he just started like throwing gun shit out there. Like me, and my head was like exploding. I'm like, whoa! Like, why didn't you guys tell me this like a week ago? Like, if we had Oberg on, I would have loved to have Ryan on to explain, because he'll be able to explain it all to us. The man builds guns, like he knows everything. Like he's amazingly knowledgeable about guns, and a one hell of a drone operator. So yeah, that was cool. But uh, so he sees Derek. We're assuming it's Derek Sherman yelling, looking for the girls. Says no. Um, and then he's asked again that question: did you hear anything unusual out there when you're out there? He's like, no, I didn't. Oh, and see, I started just schmoozing about how much I loved the uh you know, the both Ryan and Rachel. And I forgot the point of the story. Point of the story is Rachel and I were walking down the trail towards the creek. We heard rustling. Like I was telling you the other day, I'm like, I think I was taping video when I heard it. And she's like, oh, she's like, there's two deer. And there was a mama deer and her doe, with like probably about 15 yards away from us up on a hill. See, it's like you can hear everything in there. Like it's so quiet back there. It's like that sticks with you. It's like just being out there sticks with you. There's just a feeling out there. And it was funny because we were walking down and we got really close to the river or the creek, and we're walking, and I see like two pairs of kind of like galoshes, like rain boots, with like two pairs of socks. I'm like, what? I'm like, what the hell? What is this? and I'm like, I feel like I need to take pictures of this in case this is evidence of something, not for Delphi, obviously, but who knows, right? So I'm like, do you think this is like something that we need to worry about? She's like, nah. She's like, I think I've been out here for a while. I'm like, I don't know. Socks look fresh. I don't know. It's weird. So I took pictures of those. That's just a little aside. Um, so then they kind of get to after the fact. So Andy starts asking, well, you obviously heard about the girls going missing. He's like, yeah. And he's like, did you let them know? He's like, well, yeah. He's like, drove over to the sheriff's department a couple days like after and told him that I was out there that day. And then he says about 3 or 4 days later that 3 or 4 law enforcement agents came over to the house with 2 feds, I think one sheriff and maybe one ISP. And I told him what I saw, and he said, "Oh, okay." And he says, "Well," and I gave him my SIM card or whatever keeps the images on the memory card uh, for my camera for my photos. And he's like, "Well, did you see him again?" He's like, "Well, not for 2 or 3 years." He's like 2 or 3 years later, an investigator called me and asked me about a picture of a fence post with a car in the background. So like my interest was very piqued there. I'm like, ooh, what's this car? And that's where he says the thing. He's like, I was taking a picture of a fence post. He's like, I just like those things. I like fence posts. They're interesting to me. Like the whole courtroom kind of laughed, burst out laughing when that happened. And then he says, yeah, you can see the car in the background. We don't picture's not entered into evidence. We don't ever see it. I'm like, what hey, I'm like, he's taking pictures out there. Like frankly, I'd like to see all of David McCain's pictures. I'm sure so they must have combed through them, right? Seems like you would have caught something. But he's taking pictures of nature and fence posts, so maybe he's actively avoiding taking photographs that have people in them. I don't know. So then yeah, he asks him, did you ever get your memory card back from the state? He's like, oh, it's like, yeah, after that thing where they called me about the picture, they said I'd probably get it back in 3 or 4 days. He's like, I still haven't gotten it back. I'm like, sounds like state action there. And then he says, so by the way, were you ever subpoenaed by the state to testify? I said, nope. And so then Latrell, like I think I butchered his name, like like I've said Latrell, and I don't think it's either of those. Like I heard somebody mentioning that some like people are always butchering his name. Um, so, but for my purposes, it's Luttrell. Um, so his question was, when you interviewed with law enforcement, did they take notes? And he said yes. And he says, "Can I refresh your recollection on something?" And Andy objects. Over objection, judge allows him to give him the report. And he says, and he looks it over and he gives it back. He says, "So you left around 4 p.m.?" Says, "Yeah." And he said, "The man who shouted to you, was he near the mirrors entrance?" And he says, "Yeah." And he said, "What was he wearing?" It's like, "I remember a orange jacket, and he was a portly fellow." And then he says, "What did the man shout?" And he says, something to the effect of, have you seen 2 girls?" And he says, "Okay." And he says, "You think he arrived around 3:15 at the High Bridge?" So when he refreshed his recollection, he must have said 3:15. He's like, "Well, it's like I read that paper that you handed me, but it's like from my memories, it's like 3:15 maybe could have been 2:30." I'm like, "Oops." I'm like, "Whoa." So they're right at it's like he asked the question you didn't know the answer to, and he gave you an answer you didn't want. He's like, "So did you have your camera around your neck?" Because you remember we had the witness, and I think it was Brianne. It was either Brianne. No. I want to say it was Betsy Blair. Betsy Blair said that she saw a gentleman with a camera around his neck. He's like, I'm not sure. He's like, I have a strap to wear around my neck. He's like, oftentimes I carry it in my hands, but I could have been wearing it around my neck that day. And then that was it for cross, and then redirect. And he said, you saw, um, no, he said, you said on direct that it could have been an hour that you could have been out on the trails for an hour, or it could have been longer or shorter than an hour. He says, yeah. It's like, yeah, I think it was probably longer than an hour. And that was it. And so then we get our next witness, the next witness of the day. Um, Witness number 6, I believe. Is that right? Oh, yeah, they got a lot of witnesses on today. I'm telling you, I had the drone thing all set up, and I thought, yeah, goatee was short, and then we had the good doctor. She was on, and then we had Max, yeah, 3, Brad, 4, McCain, 5, yeah. So then witness 6 was Daryl Starrett, Sterrett, 57-year-old gentleman, born and raised in Delphi, worked 18 years at a quarry, or 15 years at a quarry, 18 years construction. I mean, I don't even understand how these numbers worked. And then he was 36 years as a firefighter because he's a volunteer firefighter. And he was actually the fire chief of the volunteer fire department in Delphi from '09 to 20. I obviously, with our son being a firefighter, had an immediate affection for him. I love firefighters. I just think they're awesome, all of them. I think they're great. I thought he was great. I just liked him a lot. Thought he was very credible, very knowledgeable, great witness. It's funny, and Andy did this direct as well. This was a big Andy day. Uh, Brad had handled the doctor, and then Andy handled all these witnesses. So he says Andy jumps right in, gets his background. He says in 2017, you were the chief as well. He's like, yeah, I was. And he says, well, what do you remember about 213? He's like, well, that morning that we were meeting with contractors about getting a new firehouse built. Then that lasted throughout the entire day. They got there early. We were going through it about getting this new house built. And he said, that probably ended around 3 to 4 o'clock. And he said the word came out uh, that we had 2 missing juveniles. And so he said, I immediately went over to the Carroll County Command Center. I told my guys, my firefighters, to stand by. So he said at the Central Command, what happened over there? He said, well, we first tried to figure out where the girls could have been. Where were they? Were they, you know, were they, there was a high school basketball game going on. Could they have gone there? They had friends. We were checking with friends. Did they go into town? It's like they were none of those places. And so uh, he says, what do you, uh, so what made you check those places that you checked? He's like, well, it was like dispatchers, they were giving us the instructions, and then, which I guess were coming from tips from the community, and then maybe phone pings, because he was relating like what Sterrett did quite a bit during the entire testimony. He was relating back to when he was deposed. Again, remember, out in Indiana, you can depose witnesses prior to, and we know the defense did in excess of 70 depositions, which is a hell of a lot of depositions. And so he kept talking. He's like, I know I was telling you about phone pings like in the depth, but he's like, I kept thinking about it, and I don't know if it was a phone ping thing. I don't think it was a phone ping thing. And he said, but it might have been. There might have been a phone ping involved. So, and he asked, who was at the command post? He says, well, Tobe, Lazenby, Steve Mullins, deputy and jailers. And he said, where were your firefighters? Well, they were at the firehouse at the ready. And he gets exhibit triple C, which is a run report from 213 of 17, entered into evidence and published to the jury. And he starts asking him about what the report is. He says, look at this document. Can you tell me what it is? He says, yeah, on the left side, it's a roster. It's a roster of all of our members. And remember, these are all volunteer firemen, guys that go out there to be heroes, take their time to help their community. Got to respect all those fellas. So that's all my guys that are on there. And then on the left side of it, if they responded, there's a check mark by them, so we know who was out there. And he says that, we write these up if there's any training, if there's any kind of incident that we have, anything really involving the fire, the fire department, we're writing up, we're going to write one of these run reports up. And it'll always include the members who were involved. And then so Andy says that this is a full list of the members who were involved in the search? He says, yep. He says, it was all my firefighters, all my cadets, captains, lieutenants, all of them. He's like, and so Andy says, so y'all were on shift? He's like, we're on shift 100% of the time. It's like, we're never off shift. If like there's a fire going down, we're all out there. It's like, we're going. So I get the impression, obviously, they're not sleeping at the firehouse every night. I mean, maybe they have a guy or two out there. But they're always on duty over there. But he said on that day, we were all on shift at the house because they had a scheduled training that was going to be happening that night. So they were all over there when this shit went down. So he's talking about on his incident log that they were called in. And he said they were called out to go to the high bridge. And he says, what time do you think that happened? So approximately between 9:30 and 10:30 p.m. or 9:30 and 10 p.m. And he says, you personally, what did you do? Did you take your own personal car? He's like, yeah, I drove my own personal vehicle down there. He's like about 6 of my guys were with me. And he said, we had, my personal vehicle and 2 apparatuses. So Andy says, well, where did you drive your vehicle down? He's like, well, I went down to 625 West off of 300, which if you don't know at this point, that is the private drive. Okay. That's Weber's private drive in Liebert's. Turned out that Liebert's the one that's actually her gate, not Brad Weber, which we find out. I think that's today. I think she came on next. So he says, well, how far down did you go? It's like, well, basically when you're on 625, it's a road and then it turns into gravel. And so 625 ends and then it turns into the private drive. So he's like, I parked right there, kind of where the pavement ended and it turned to gravel. So he said, I drove and parked and then I got out. And I walked down the lane. And then so he says, as you walk down, what did you do? He says, well, I met up with the rest of my crew that had been out there. We all walked down the private drive. And I said, look, spread out. We're going to search. We walked down under the high bridge. And so we're going to start searching down here. And so, and then he asked, he's like, was there a vehicle that had gone down the lane for light? And he says, yeah. It's like one of the vehicles came down so they could illuminate the light. And then Andy asks him, were there any floodlights? Andy said his original question was like, because he couldn't think of the word floodlights. Like I've done that so many times, like more times than I can count, where I can't like think of a word and I kind of like pivot and come up with something that's not quite on point, but kind of. He's like, those lights, like when there's a Hollywood premiere and everybody kind of there's like a little chuckle in the courtroom. And it's like there are a couple of like little chuckle moments, and it's like the gravity of these situations are super heavy, right? And it's like there's not people in there laughing where like we're at a comedy show, but like the weight of what we're all experiencing weighs on all of us, right? So like sometimes when there's something like that's a little bit funny, it's kind of nice to have that just like teeny little break of levity, so like anytime. And there were a couple times where there were some pretty heavy duty chuckles. um it happened with McCain, and it happened with former fire chief Sterrett here too. um because Andy starts refreshing his recollection an awful lot like in this thing. uh oh, thanks, Will. I love I like this shirt too. It's actually the shirt. A lot of people say that they love this shirt, and it's actually for a band that I love very much. They're a local act out of Louisville, uh, who I dig very very much. They're called Mr. Please. They're on Spotify. You should give them a listen. They're a jam band, but they're really really funky. They're great. I love them live. I get like in a weird hypnotic trance when I listen to them. They're really good. But I digress. All right, so back to business here. Okay, so uh at that point, he's like he's like, floodlights. He's like, were there any portable, like, did you guys have any portable floodlights out there? He's like, I honestly don't remember. I don't recall. He's like, and he's like, we were searching the southwest side. There were six of us, and I had ordered a hasty search. Like, Sterrett went out there with the absolute absolute determination to find the girls. Like he went out there like, I'm finding these girls. It was like what you'd expect from every firefighter. I'm going to save these girls. He's like, I thought they were going to be in peril. Like I thought that maybe they had gotten injured or fallen or lost, and I'm going to find them. I'm going to save these girls. And like he went out there with that intent. And then And Andy asked him, he's like, well, so how did the search go? He's like, were you all spread out, or did you kind of like stand arm to arm and do? He's like, no, like I ordered that hasty search, and it was not like an organized grid search. We were kind of spread out. And he said, did you personally search the north side of the creek? Okay, so just so you can recollect, you've got Deer Creek here, right? Curvy, windy creek. And they're on the south side of it. Now remember, the crime scene is on the north side, what I would consider to be, if you're looking at the map, it might not be directionally truly accurate when you're like this map that we're always looking at. But if we're looking at the map that we're always looking at, the crime scene is in that north of the creek east. So it's northeast. So they are down on the south side of the creek. And then he says, did you personally search the north side of the creek? And he says, no. And he says, you briefly searched the east side. And he said, briefly. And he says, okay, so what time did you leave the scene? He's like, I think sometime between 1:30 and 2. And then this is the first time of many that Andy refreshes the recollection. So it's like, do you need you need a copy of my DEP? He's like, no, I brought mine. So he reads through it. He's like, okay. He's like, I'm going to ask you again. Did that refresh your recollection? He says, yes, it did. So what time did you clear the scene? He's like, well, it's like there's a difference between clearing the scene and leaving the scene. I cleared the scene between 1:30 and 2, and then I left the scene at 2:30 a.m. And he's like, okay. So he says, can I refresh your recollection as to whether you searched the east side? He's like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, uh, I did search the east side for a bit. And he says, did you order a search of the north or south side of the creek? He says, yes, I did. I ordered a search of the north and south sides of the creek proper. And I thought that this was very significant because, and it's significant for a lot of reasons. um, because look, if I'm if I'm from Delphi, Indiana, right, and two girls go missing off the High Bridge, which is a dilapidated, rundown, terrifying bridge. I honestly don't know if I would cross it anymore. Like when I was young, I probably wouldn't even have thought about it. I'd be like, "Psst, yeah, I'm going. Psst, come on, dude, got great balance, all that shit." Like now, I don't know if I'll do it. Like I don't. Like I honestly don't know. I'd probably be like, like, because it's high and it is very run down. Even the part that's still left. And so my first thought wouldn't be that, oh my God, somebody kidnapped and killed the girls. I mean, this is a very rural area. It's a beautiful little uh, nature trail. Like you don't think there's people out there. Like I haven't been out there where it hasn't been somebody else out there. Like there's always somebody out there walking the trails. It's a lovely place to be, despite the heaviness of it. And I would think my first thought would be, oh my God, maybe they fell off the bridge, right? And like they fell into the water somehow. So, and are injured. Like that would be the first thing that people would think. So it would make sense that they would obviously be searching the water first. And of course, if you've got your box flashlights and potentially floodlights out there, that you would potentially see the clothes that were in the river, right? It's not a crazy thought. So he says that he did order the searches of the north and south side of the creek. He's like, do you remember any floodlights on the scene? And this time, or high intensity lights, he says, I do not. He's like, I'm going to refresh your recollection. And he says, and he said, he's like, I told you then. He's like, I don't know. I don't remember if there were any out there, honestly. And he says, "Well, who do you know that was out there? Who was out there searching? Who was the search party like made up of?" He's like, "Well, police officers, firefighters, family members." And Baldwin says, "Citizens?" He's like, "Citizens?" He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I will say there were civilians." He says, "Ah, yeah, civilians. That's right. That's what I meant." He's like, "Yeah, there were some civilians out there." And he says, "Was it light or dark?" He's like, "Well, it was nighttime, so it was dark." He's like, "What were you using to light your way?" It's like, "Well, we had our hand lanterns." He's like, "They're made for fighting interior fighters." Like, there's two settings. There's, like a spot setting for spotlight, and then like a floodlight setting for wide light. And he said, "Did you see any lights on the opposite side of the creek?" So remember, they're on the south side of the creek, crime scene's on the north. And he says, "Yes, I did." The next question was, did you see people using their flashlights to look in the creek from the north side? And he says, he's like, I don't know. And then he refreshes his recollection. And then he says, his answer is yes, I did. I claimed in my depth that I said, yeah, I did see. So he says, and then there's um, McClellan asks, or was this Diener or McClellan? I think this is Diener. Or no, I think this is McClellan. He says, McClellan says, I asked a preliminary question. He says, he said, what does that refer to? You and your crew? And he says, yeah. He says, you and your team were looking in the creek because he said, who was, because it became a question. He said, we were searching the creek, and then McClellan wanted clarification. Like, who does we refer to? And he says, does that refer to you and your crew? And he's like, yeah, that was me and my crew only. I wasn't talking about the royal we. So he says, were you and your team looking in the creek? And he says, yes. And you saw flashlights on the opposite side? Yes. Did you hear anyone shout out, we found some clothes? He says, no. Question, were you able to hear people on both sides of the creek? He had to refresh his recollection again. Yes. Question, when you ordered a general search, was that intended to cover more ground quickly? Yes. That's it. So then, no questions on Cross by McClellan. So then we got some jury questions. And there were so many times that he was his recollection was refreshed. So like the first question from the jury was, how long ago did you take your deposition, and when did you get a copy? He's like, I was deposed like 3 or 4 weeks ago. He's like, I didn't get a copy right away, but I got one like recently. And then the next question was, did you search the area southeast of the cemetery? And he said, which is another great jury question, me? No, not personally. And then that was that. So then we got witness number 7, which is Steve Mullen. And that one, this was an interesting one. Oh man, there she is. I don't know. Seems like she's blowing me off. Might be flowing. So look, I mean, she's had to do solo, so I'm not going to snivel. All right. So next we get Steve Mullen up for the third or fourth time. I can't remember how many times the state called him, but Andy calls him, and it's pretty interesting cross. A lot of back and forth. This is your typical defense attorney cop direct examination. And again, it's tough. It's tough directing. And I have to say, Andy got away with a fair amount of leading on these questions. Like he did, which I'm glad. Because it's like it's really hard to squeeze answers out of somebody if it's an antagonistic witness. If you're um really trying to get some information that they don't want to give you out, you know. So at this point, the first question Andy asks is, how important is it to save evidence in a case? And Mullen says it's very important. And then Baldwin says it's important to both the defense and the prosecution, right? Yes, yes, it is. And he said, would it be important to notify the defense of any lost evidence? And I'm like, oh boy, this is where he's going. This is where he's going. So he says, well, yeah, it would be important to uh, notify the defense. And Baldwin says, why? He says, well, for the integrity of the case. And he said, what if any evidence was lost in this case? Cleveland says, I've got a qualifying question. Which case? The case against Richard Allen? Because he says, I like it. If that's what you're talking about, I'm going to object. Well, so Andy says, well, yeah, the investigation into the murders of Abby and Libby is the investigation I'm talking about. McClellan makes an objection as to relevance. He's like, I don't see what other parts of the investigation having nothing to do with Richard Allen. Why is that relevant here? And so they go and have a sidebar. It's relevant because everything that happened that precedes the arrest of Richard Allen is allowed to be looked at and examined by the defense because you have no idea what may or may not be exculpatory to Richard Allen. A perfect example is this freaking van thing that just popped up. I mean, by Nick McClelland's logic, this van thing should have never popped up because Brad Weber is irrelevant, right? You know, it's like we hear of Brad Weber. If the defense would have tried to bring Brad Weber up, they would have got shut down. McClelland said, Brad Weber's not relevant, Your Honor. What's he have to do with this case against Richard Allen? It's got everything to do with it. Everything in this entire investigation has everything to do with Richard Allen. It's all on the table, all of it. And of course, Gull sustained it. It's crazy. So they go and have a sidebar, and Baldwin's got to try to pivot and get these answers out that he needs. He needs the jury to hear, and he's got to come up with a creative way so that the jury can hear that they lost massive amounts of interviews in this case at the most critical time of any investigation, the very beginning. So he says, in this case, are there interviews that were not turned over to the state and the defense in 2017? He says, yes, there were interviews that were not available to either side. And so, so then Andy, very slickly, very, very, very crafty move here. His next sentence is, so when did those go missing? You see how he did it there? So he snuck it in. He first said, so when, like in this case, are there interviews that were not available to the state and the prosecution, or the state and the defense? And he says, yeah. And the second time he asked us, so when did they go missing? All right, you see how he did that? And so Mullen's like, I don't like, I'm not sure. And he's like, well, does the dates of 20, so he leads a bit here. He says, do the dates of, 2/14/17 to 3/1/17 ring a bell? It's like, yeah. It's like, that sounds right. And then Andy says, so what list was created to describe the people that were interviewed that are missing? And he's like, well, there's a list of the names and dates of people. So there's no actual list that exists that details the interviews that were taken, from whom they were taken of, and when they were taken, and when they went missing exactly. Like, that list does not exist. Remember, they didn't know, the defense didn't know about this until so late in the game. Like this came out, and we're going to get to his answer. We're going to find out when the state knew about this, right? So the answer, like his answer is like, there's a list of names and dates of people. It doesn't answer the question. So Baldwin says interviewing people at the beginning of a case is very important because that's when memories are fresh and vibrant, right? It's when things are the freshest in people's minds. Like, it's critical. It's critical information. So he says, yes, it is. It's critical information. And so Baldwin says, well, when did you discover that the interviews were missing? And what did you do? He says, well, I couldn't really do anything. It's like they were gone. It's like they were gone. And he says, well, okay. So like, did you do anything? He's like, well, I wrote a report about it. He's like, "Oh, you wrote a report about it." He's like, "That report." He's like, "When did you write that report?" He's like, "Right away." He's like, "Right away." He's like, "What is that?" He's like, "What do you?" So wait, you discovered these went missing in August, and you're saying that you wrote a report right away in August. He's like, "Did you date that report?" Like, no. It's like, "I didn't date that report." It's like, "I didn't date that report." He's like, "Did you go to the people whose interviews were lost and re-interview them?" He's like, "Well," he's like, I didn't." He's like, "My job is just to take care of the discovery. That's what my role is. I take care of the discovery." I was like, I wouldn't be the one to go out and interview people. So I don't know if that was done." So Andy says, "Was there a single person from the lost videos that was re-interviewed?" He's like, I think someone was." And Andy says, "Isn't it your job to take care of the evidence?" He says, "Yes." And he said, "Well, who would have made the decisions to re-interview people? Like, who, if it's not you, who would have done it?" I, I don't know. It's like you've got this plausible deniability with every single cop in this case. It's like you're sitting there, and like I've been knowing this, right? Because I've been reading about this shit for 2 years. Like the new players of the game, Andrea and Lee, their heads are probably exploding. Like, what is going on? Like, what is, and it's like when you see them now at trial and their decision has been to get on the stand to a man, to a cop, and act like they don't know a goddamn thing about this investigation. It's crazy. Holman knows nothing about the investigation, at least when he's on the stand. Mullins knows nothing about the investigation, at least when he's on the stand. Liggett knows nothing about the investigation, at least when he's on the stand. It's this whole thing. It's this entire air of plausible deniability. And you know what happens though? It's the same concept of when you have a cop that is asked a question that has a definitive answer or a common sense answer or has been impeached, and they simply won't just be truthful. They just won't own it. They just won't say, "Yeah, that's correct." They'll be slippery. And what that does is it destroys the credibility of that cop. It just does it. I don't know why they don't understand that. I don't know why they don't understand that. I don't know why it's lost on them. I honestly don't. Because them not under, like, this is not that case where their evidence is so powerful that they can overcome a parade of cops getting on the stand looking incompetent. They don't have that type of evidence. I promise you. I have no idea what this verdict is going to be, but they do not have the type of evidence where you can pull that shit off. They just don't. We've heard it all. We've heard it all. And like, I'm not going to bring up I got the somebody posted, one of the media posted the Google searches. I'm not going to go through it tonight cuz I got to get to bed after this live, but we'll go through it tomorrow. Um you guys have probably seen it. Like, I don't know. I don't know. No, it's not necessarily he could have asked to treat this witness as hostile. Santini, he could have. I mean, he's definitely an adverse witness, right? I mean, he's not a friendly, so it's like in theory he could have done it. But it ended up he didn't need to. He really didn't. He got a lot out of this guy, and he was able to get away with a fair amount of leading. So he's like, and then as a matter of fact, so you can't tell me who would have been in charge of re-interviewing all these people that you lost these interviews from, right? He's like, so there was a second group of interviews that went missing. And he's like, yeah, that's true. He's like, we had a problem with the hard drive. He's like, but we sent it out. I ordered a bunch of different software and we recovered the video. Crowd's cheering. Everybody in the gallery was cheering. Yeah, yeah, but there's no audio. Oh. And so what are the dates of that? He's like, well, I think we lost all of the video, but recovered it with no audio from April 28th through June 2nd. And he's like, was there so Andy says, okay. Wow. It's like, so was there a list made of the lost interviews? He says, yeah, a list was made. He's like, have you produced that to us? It's like, I don't know. Just looking around. I didn't produce it to you. That's like not my that's like my job is to watch the evidence. I like that I control and watch the evidence. That's what my job. Like somebody else does list things and sends those to you guys. That's on me. Ask Nick. Did Nick give you Nick? Did you send them that list? So he says, and he says, the interviews are important, right? It's like interviews are important. He says, yes, they're critical to an investigation. And he's like, well, let me ask you this, Investigator Mullins. How is an interview without sound valuable? He's like, all interviews are valuable. And so he says, wait a second. He's like, okay, all interviews are valuable. So how is an interview without sound valuable? Isn't the sound important? And Mullins says, he's like, yeah, well, yeah, the sound is definitely important. So he's like, all right. And you, I assume, created a report about this law. He's like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I definitely created a report about this. I definitely created a report. He's like, did you date it? It's like, no, I didn't date that one either. I just didn't date it. And he said something and like laughed about it. And then Baldwin looked at him. He said, is there something funny? And like from that moment on, like this kind of like cavalier, cocksure attitude that Mullins had on the stand vanished. Like Andy pantsed him there. He's like, because he's laughing in the middle of a trial of two beautiful little girls that were murdered, and we're trying to figure out who the hell did it, whether it's this, the guy sitting at the table or whether it's somebody else out there. And this guy's talking about evidence, massive amounts of evidence that they lost. And he's chuckling on the stand. And when Andy said, what is this funny to you? Like this is what it was one of the times where, you know, the homespun charm took a back seat for a second and Andy got real on him and it shut the shit down. Like so from that point forward in this particular direct examination, Andrew Baldwin owned him. And he lost all that cocksureness. So he's like, yeah, both were not dated. I'm sorry. I should have dated them. And he says, when did you tender these reports to the defense? And he's like, I'm not sure. He's like, does February of 2024 sound right? So you're at this point going on 6.5 years into the investigation, and that's when you give us notice. He's like, why didn't you? He's like, as a matter of fact, you didn't send us those reports until we notified you that it looked like these interviews were missing, right? It's like, no. He's like, well, he's like, I just assumed that you guys figured it out, through the voluminous amount of discovery that we had sent you. And he's like, okay. So he says, well, okay, so when do you think when do you think the defense found out about the missing videos? And then objection, McClellan, preliminary question. He's like, it's like, do you work for the defense or something like that? And I didn't even write the question down. He's like, it's like, something to just show that he would have no knowledge as to when the defense would have found out. It's like, I'm not sure, you know, uh, it's probably over a year ago. Um, and Baldwin says, well, that the defense was scrutinizing, just absolutely scrutinizing your memorialization of evidence in this case, correct? Says yes. And the recordings of things, recording interviews, those are important in terms of memorializing things. He says, yes. He says, yet you didn't tape the interview, which we established the other day, of Brad Weber, did you? And he says, oh, uh, you mean the one that I just did? Yeah. He's like, no, no, no. He's like, so this Brad Weber, like the Brad Weber interview that happened very recently, you had to call him to set that up, right? And he said, yeah, yeah, I had to. And, but you didn't tape that, right? So you've got a guy that you're calling after a very long time with something that apparently is very critical to the state's case in chief now. And you decided that you didn't need to record that. And he says, well, it's like, I didn't record it. He says, so Andy says, well, we'll never know what you said to Brad Weber about what he was going to come in and talk to you about, are we? Like we have no. He's like, I didn't say anything like about what he was. We just told him that he needed to come in and we need to talk to him. I didn't say anything about him having to come in, about when he left work, or anything about what he was driving. Nothing. I didn't say anything. I just said, we need you to come in. We need to talk to you. He says, so, and you didn't record that. So we just got to take your word for it. Right. He's like, well, I made a report. It's like, did you date it? It's like, I think so. And then Andy says, well, do you have one of these things? He likes to do this. He holds it like this. Do you have one of these things? It's like, yeah. He's like, can you record on this thing? Like, does this thing make recordings? It's like, yeah. He's like, I don't exactly know. Like, I was on the phone with him. I was talking to him on the phone, and I don't know how to make a record. Like, I don't know how to record somebody when I'm talking to him on the phone. And he's okay. He's like, well, what about a handheld recorder? You have one of those? It's like, yeah. He's like, I have one. It's like, I don't know where it is. He's like, is there a store in Delphi where if you can't find that, where you can go buy a handheld recorder? He's like, well, I have one. I just don't know where it is. He's like, okay. He's like, but you didn't record that, right? And he said, so uh what was like when was the first time that Weber told you that he drove a white van directly from work to home? And he says, August 8th of this year. And he says, so are you aware what are there any other dates that you're aware of that Brad Weber ever said that? What he told you that he drove directly from home or from work to home to anyone ever? Are you aware of any other conversation that he had with any other law enforcement agent at any point during the last 7 years where he told somebody else what he just told you on August 8th? He's like, I don't know. He said, was there anything in your investigation that you ever saw in your investigation file that indicated to you that he may have said something else about where he went after work that day? Uh, well, he said his answer to that was he said that he might have been driving his Subaru. Cleveland objects and asks, I didn't even write down what the objection was at this point. Like, so then Andy says, Officer Goatee, um, I refreshed his recollection as to Brad Weber driving home, but uh, somehow it wasn't refreshed as to the other details. Do you remember that you were sitting in the courtroom when that happened, right? He's like, yeah, I was sitting here. He's like, I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how his memory wasn't refreshed. It's like, you're asking the wrong guy. It's like, you got to ask him or ask, Poole. He's like, are you aware that Brad Weber gave conflicting information? Are you aware of that? He says, yes. Are you aware that Brad Weber has a side job? Says, yeah. He's like, do you know what is that side job? He's like, I think he has some ATMs that he maintenances. It's okay. I said, are you aware that Brad Weber maintained his ATMs on 213 of 17? His answer was he said he went straight home. So they're just like, this is one of those things where Mullins absolutely knows that there's a 203, or I'm sorry, a 302, and that it's going to come in at some point because the defense is really fighting to get it in. And they're just like they're oblivious to this fact. So they're dying on the hill. They're dying, they're just dying on this hill of pretending like he didn't say this other shit. And it's like I just like how do you guys think that that will play with the jury when this thing eventually comes in, which they're gonna get it in one way or another. They're fighting very, very diligently to get this in. Like, how do you think that'll play with the jury? Like, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's just it's hard for me to make sense of it. Like it's not gonna work out well for them. I mean, if they give a shit about this case, they sure seem to be submarining it, or whoever's strategy it was to play hide the ball. I think it's the wrong strategy. This ain't that case. Like hide the ball in cases where you've got very thin evidence. I mean, if they are saved on this case, it's going to be because of the confessions and the confessions alone. It's not gonna be because of this shit show. It's like because they tortured him into making confessions, and true or not true, I don't know. Like they extracted them out of him. The question is, are they real or are they not? I mean, there's no question they tortured him out of him. The only question is, are they authentic or are they hallucinatory, psychotic ramblings that he's just had pounded into his head, or they've tempted him with saying, "Hey, man, you want to see your wife finally after 7 months? You want a personal visit? Just tell us you did it, dude. Just tell us you did it. You want to get transferred out of this shithole? Just tell us you did it. It's that easy. It's that easy. Simple. This is simple, Rick. You don't have to make it that hard, bro." So Andy keeps going. So what kind of gun does Brad Weber own? Says a Sig Sauer. He's like, did you ever put together a list of the law enforcement agents that walked around the crime scene, around where the bullet was found? Is there a list of all the cops that were around that crime scene that day? He's like, I did not keep that log. Like, there's a log that exists about everybody who checked in and out of the crime scene when they came. Like, he's like, I don't know. That's not my thing. He's like, is there a list that you're aware of asking every law enforcement agent that was at that scene that day the type of gun that they had at the scene? Does that list exist? I don't know. So he says, after watching Richard Allen's interviews, um, do you ever remember, like you watched them, right? We watched them. We all watched them. Do you remember Rick Allen saying that he didn't know which way he drove that day? And he died on the hill. And he said, yeah, I remember. Like he didn't he said he didn't know. He knew. He was clear. Went through town. I went to where he parked. Kathy brought me to where they parked today. Got it on video. She walked me down. She's like, that's the road we went. This is where we parked every time we came. I know exactly where it is. It's not the old CPS lot. It's exactly where he described. There's a little red bridge that goes over 25. There used to be, it comes straight out of town. You go right up this. Now they've got three large rectangular blocks blocking this, and it wasn't a paved road. It was like a kind of a dirt road, gravelly dirt road that led right from Main Street. You go straight up, boop, a couple of parking spots right there. Used to be a gravel trail. Go over the Little Red Bridge that goes over 25. You walk right up to the Freedom Bridge, which didn't look like it does now. It's where she says they park all the time. It's where she said they parked all the time. So, did you says how many people, Mr. Mullins, do you think are involved in this murder? He says one. It's like, how long have you thought that? It's like, since the arrest of Richard Allen. What an answer. So he says, so early on, you thought it may have been more than one person, right? Says, it doesn't matter what I think. What a non-answer. Like, how does that play off to a jury? I mean, like the defense is effectively planting the seed that this is really, really a tough case to kind of hang your hat on the concept that one person did it. And I just have a ponderable for you guys out there that I'm curious as to what your thoughts are. Remember, we know the concept that there were no restraints used here. Okay. So you tell me, somebody in chat, how does one guy SA two girls? How does one guy SA two girls without restraints on either of them? How does that happen? Like I'm going to this purported confession. How does that happen? I'm open. I'm open to suggestions. Throw them in the chat, please. I'm always open to suggestions. We have no indications, no ligature marks, no indications of any restraints whatsoever. We've heard the state's witness as to this. It does not exist. The gun thing does not work. Well, I mean, there is no evidence of that, but the state's really trying to push this narrative that that's what his intent was because it's something that is said that he has said by Monica Walla. So we have to believe Monica Walla because remember, she destroyed her handwritten notes. Do you now see the significance of why it would be important that Monica Walla save her handwritten notes for litigation? Would anybody like to see those before we convict a guy for a crime based on her words that she wrote on that paper, but that we didn't see, but we just saw what she typed into a database or software? Who spent an awful lot of time obsessing about this case. I mean, I'm going to read you real quick as a little bit of an aside. I'm going to read you the groups that Monica Walla was a part of and when she joined them. She was a member of the Murder Sheet discussion group since August 25th of 2022. And we know where they're at, right? They call me a defense shield. Those are the biggest prosecutor lackeys I've ever seen in my life. The irony of that is insane to me. She was a part of Delphi search for a killer since August 22 of 2022. She was a member of Delphi After Dark, August 30th, 2022. Good old Rick. She was a member of Delphi Murders Uncensored since November 12th of 2022. She was a member of Delphi Murder Let's Chat since November 30th of 2022. She was a member of Down the Hill, the Unsolved Delphi Murders since June 9th of 2022. She was a member of Defense Diaries. And check this date out. Defense Diaries, the Insiders are a discussion group since June 15th, 2023. You know why that? You know why that date is significant? That is the date that she tested that. That is the date of the first safekeeping hearing for Richard Allen to be moved. When they first attempted to get him the hell out of Westville. That's the date that she joined our group. So look, you can take that for whatever it's want. If you think that that's a person who's that deeply invested into figuring out who killed Abby and Libby, that should be the treating psychologist for a man who is psychotic, then we're going to have to agree to disagree. It's that simple. It's not okay. It's completely unethical. And this man's life hangs in the balance based on the words she wrote. Make no bones about it. This case is boiled down to that statement. This case has become all about the van. I don't know if Rick Allen said anything about a van. If Monica Wallace saw fit to her thinking that Richard Allen was the guy, He may have given him a little boost. Oh, oh, what about the van? Do you remember the van? Oh, yeah, the van. Oh, were you lying in wait? I don't know. You can't trust it. You can't trust it. If I could play songs on YouTube, I'd be having Public Enemies. You can't trust it. Like on blast right now. Like we all want to know what happened here, and this ain't the way to do it. Like what they're gonna like if they get a conviction on this, and Rick Allen's the guy. Like, why didn't they do it on the up and up? Why didn't they do it on the up and up? Everyone would have felt a hell of a lot better about it if you're doing it on the up and up. It's gonna leave me always doubting this verdict if it comes down on the side of a conviction based on that bullshit. It's that simple. It's that simple. And if you're fine with it, I don't know what to tell you. You're living in the wrong country, sucker. This ain't it. This is not how our justice system is built to work. This is not how we convict people in this country. It's not how it's done. It's not how it's done. Or is it? Is this what we're turning into? The shit that we ran away from in England? All right. So I digress. So sorry, Bob Rant. Okay. So he then asks Mullen, what time do you think the killer left the scene? Mullen says, I don't know. I don't know. So, well, it's a major problem for the timeline that Betsy Blair didn't identify Richard Allen, isn't it? He's like, ah, he's like, it's not critical because Richard Allen put himself on the bridge that day. This whole concept, like, there's a saying in the law, and ask any lawyer. You got any lawyer friends? And if they practice criminal law, doesn't matter which side. Just saying in the law, mere presence is not enough. Mere presence is not enough. You can't convict people because they were there. You need more evidence. And right now, what we have is an unspent shell casing in a story that was written down by a woman who was deeply invested in this case, who was treating a man who had been absolutely psychologically tortured. I mean, if you're good with this, I don't know. We're just going to have to agree to disagree adamantly. And I will happily, unless you're one of those suck bags that sits on your channel and calls me names because you've got nothing authentic to say, I will discuss this case with anybody. I'm here for you. Let's go. Convince me. Convince me on the evidence that we have seen in this case, because it's all out there. All you people say there's more. They were holding back the best evidence. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. And you know who told you they weren't? This guy. Over and over and over again. This guy. If you get a conviction on this case, it's going to be because of that bullshit confession. I can't trust it. If you decide you want to trust it, that's on y'all. And you know who you are. You know who I'm talking to. All right. So I got a quick, like, I'm just telling you, I was very, very pissed off. Like the last 3 days, and it's only going to get worse when I see this video. Like this, when the videos of him just in it are going to be incredibly, incredibly tough to watch. Because I care about human beings. I just do. Like even the biggest pieces of shit deserve to be true. Like, we just don't treat our prisoners like that. We have humanity in this country. It's dictated. It's prohibited by the Constitution. Cruel and unusual punishment is prohibited by the Constitution of the United States. You can't allow this. I don't care if you think that he's guilty. I don't care. You can't support this type of behavior by the government. Please, I'm begging you. Pre-trial detainee, presumed innocent. It's that simple. So Brad asks, it's a major problem for your timeline if Betsy Blair didn't identify Richard Allen. He says it's not critical because Allen put himself on the bridge. And he says, so what time did Richard Allen go out onto the bridge? And he says, well, we have his car on the Hoosier Harvest video at 1:27, which is in line with when he said he was there from 1:30 to 3:30. And Baldwin says, well, he actually told you that he was there from 12 to 1:30. Doolin says, well, or Mullen says, no, he told Doolin that he was there from 1:30 to 3:30. And Baldwin says, well, were you there with Doolin when he said that? No. Did Doolin record that interview? No. Did Doolin have notes from that interview? All of it, all the shit, all the things that they don't do. All the things that they don't do. All the things that they don't do in this investigation. Like record interviews. Like not lose interviews that they did record. Like look into tips beyond tunnel vision to a lot. I mean, I could go on forever. I got to reel it in and get this done. It's getting too late. I'm gonna have to digress, y'all. Okay, so he then asks him, so why is it important that Betsy Blair describe Richard Allen's car? He's like, I don't think it is terribly important because she may have just misidentified that car. Okay, so she misidentified a 65 Mercury with a 2016 Ford Focus. Ooh, I don't know. So why is it important that the person that Betsy Blair and Sarah Carbaugh saw are the same person? So what Baldwin's doing here is challenging their timeline. He's trying to get this witness, the prosecutor's investigator, to lay out for the jury why it matters. Why is this? Why, like, this is important to your timeline, right? And it matters, right? So why does it matter? Get an objection from McClellan. It's sustained. So why is it important that Monica Walla was listening to podcasts about the Delphi case? Why is that important? Do you know why that's important, Investigator Mullins? Do you know? Do you think that's important? Do you think that Rick's psychologist in prison that was treating him daily and writing down things he was saying was listening to podcasts about this case? Do you think that's important? Why is that important? I don't know. You know what his answer was? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. He says, was there ever an Amber Alert given for Abby and Libby? I don't know. I don't know. Oh, here's our answer. This guy. That's our answer. Abby fainted. Okay. All right. It's a theory. It's definitely a theory. He's answering, or she's answering, whatever you may be, is answering the question as to how uh to to essay two girls with one person with nobody being restrained. Somebody passed out. Okay. How many people were at the bridge with Bree Wilbur? He's like, I think it was four girls. You mean including her? It's like, yeah, I think so. He said, did you hear how high David McLean said the high bridge was? Yes. He's like, and that decline down the hill is what? 10, 15, 20 feet? He's like, I don't know. He's like, when you came down the hill, where'd you come out? He's like, I came out on Weber's private uh private drive. He's like, and when you go down that, there's like another layer, right? And then there's another layer, and then you're down at the creek, right? He's like, yeah. He's like, yeah. He's like, oh, okay, well, how many feet is that? Do you know how many feet? Like, how many feet are you going down? He's like, he's like, I don't know. It's like I don't know the topography of it. He's like, well, did anybody measure it? He's like, I don't know if anybody measured it. So he says, what is the latest time that the phone under Abby's body would have been moved? And he says, he gives their time of death, like the Apple Health data. That's the time. Like I telling you, they're locked in to this whole 232 to 237 time of death thing. It's like they're stuck in it. They're stuck in it. They've when I'm telling you that they have put all their eggs into the Brad Weber van basket, trust me, because I'm telling you, they did. I don't know what any of the other creators are saying, but I'm telling you, you're hearing it here, and I'm gonna challenge anybody in my 2 years of content of the things that I say. I stand by every goddamn thing I've said, and I've been right about all of it, all of it, all the way back to when they pulled Bald Baldwin and Rosie off the case. Well, maybe Andrea went back and watched some of my content. I kid. I mean, she's seeing it. Like she's seeing what I've been yelling about for 2 years. I love having other lawyers in there. Like I said, it gives me it's like peer review to me. Yeah. Yeah, I'm still going. Thanks, babe. Thanks for nothing. I know you're fighting the good fight out there, so I'm not giving you any shit at all. Um I have been going on rants. See, like Allie would reel me in on my rants. Like that's why you guys need Allie. Allie always like she'll like Bob, need to calm down. Sadie, I have a YouTube channel. Do you want me to sit here and not talk? I mean, Andrea goes for 5 hours. So I'm only at 2:30. Eh, yeah. Um, okay, so he says the phone never left in your theory, right? The phone never left being under Abby's body, right? He says no. He says, well, also in your theory, Richard Allen never left with the phone, right? Says nope, sure didn't. So remember these questions. Remember these questions, please, because they're asking them to every witness for a reason, and they're locking them in their answers for a reason. They have a response to all of these questions, and they're locked into them. They've asked it to every single cop that's gotten on the stand, all these same questions. So it's your theory depends. Like your theory is that the phone never left from being under Abby's body, right? Nope, it never left. Richard Allen never left with the phone, correct? Nope, never left with the phone. Do you think that Richard Allen returned to the scene? I don't know. I don't know. That's his answer for that. So then he switches gears. Did the search ever come within 100 feet of the girls? Says, I don't know. And then we switch over to the trail cams. He says, so the trail cams, is there anything relevant that was seen on the trail cams? He says, well, so we finally hear about the mystery trail cams. It says there is a trail cam and that it showed some searchers in frame, but I don't know the distance. So this goes on forever, this trail cam battle. There's a recollection is refreshed. He says, what did the trail cam reveal in terms of how close the people were to the bodies? He says his answer is the camera shows that somebody's in front of the camera. I can't give you a distance. I cannot give you a distance. So he says, so where's the location of the trail cam? So he says he goes over the map. He says it's north of the creek, kind of on the top of this hill. So he says it's northwest of the crime scene. And he said, what day was it that you can see the person on the trail cam? And he says, on the 14th. He says, oh, really? He's like, are you sure that it's not the 13th? He has to go and refresh his recollection. And he says, so they were directly in front of that camera on the 13th. And he says, yes, after he refreshes his recollection. He said, he said, how would you describe the area that the crime scene is in? He's like, well, he's like, it's it's got layers, and then I consider it to be on a floodplain, and then there's a bowl. It's like a bowl. And then he says, so how many tips out of the 14,000 tips came in were about Richard Allen? And he says, one. He says, wait. He's like, that wasn't a tip, right? Like Richard Allen came in and self-reported, right? Came in and told y'all he was out at the trail and on the bridge, right? It's like, yeah, that wasn't a tip. He told us he was out on the trails. So he says, how many people were searching for the girls on the 13th? He says, I don't know. Was there a list? He's like, only the firefighters. Oh, he's like, oh, you mean the report that we put into evidence? That's the only list. So only the firefighters. So the investigators didn't create any lists about who were searching, but the firefighters did. Makes sense. Makes sense. And I loved this question, this next question. I just love it. Love it, love it, love it. Was there a concern that maybe the girls had fallen into the water? And he says that was a concern. It's like, it just solidifies that they definitely would have been looking hard in that river. Yeah, we love Andrea. I don't know who's talking about that. Like, all I'm saying is Andrea talks longer than I. Like, somebody was like, I talk. I like to hear myself talk. I'm like, I have a YouTube channel. Like, here, this is Pass. Not fun. All right. So, this thing is about like we're getting close and it gets like super tasty. Like my favorite part is coming and it's right at the end of it. So he says, he's like, "Are you aware as to anyone searching north of the creek, east of the bridge?" He says, "I'm not aware." Um, he says, "But you don't know if someone wasn't searching there." He's like, "I don't know." He's like, "Why did it take the unified command so long to get Kelsey's DNA?" He's like, "I don't know. I don't know." He's like, "Who would know the most about Liberty German's cell phone data?" He's like, "Christopher Cecil?" It's like, all right. He says, "Did multiple tipsters call in saying that they recognized the bridge guy's voice?" It's like, "Oh, yeah." He's like, "What, dozens?" There's more than that. He's like, "Hundreds?" He's like, "It's possible." So then he says, "How many times?" Oh, wait. Wait, hold on. So this is his. All right, I can't read this damn question. I remember I liked it. This isn't the great one though. Damn it. I'll have to my hand was dead at this point, yo. What you're gonna have to I should just like like read it and then like pretended like it didn't exist. How many times before? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is. All right, so McClellan's cross. So he focuses on one thing and one thing alone. Like he didn't care about any of the other shit. And he says, uh, so you interviewed Weber, correct? And you called him, right? You called him to tell him to come in, correct? He's like, yes, yes, I did. And you didn't tell him what the topic of the interview was going to be about, right? Not at all. He says, that's correct. That's correct. And he says, and then when he did come in, you recorded that interview, right? He's like, yes, 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 I did. I did. And he said he drove a van, right? He said yes. And they said he verified that, correct? With phone records that he drove his van. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what the hell? What does that mean? Like, what is that? Like, what is that? I don't like what does that mean? So he clarifies. He's like, yes, yes. He said that he had looked at his text messages and was able to figure out that he had driven his van that day. And then he says, okay. And then and he said, as far as Brad Weber, he gave his SIG over to police. He offered it up for testing, right? He says, yes, he did. And law enforcement returned that weapon to him, correct? Yeah. And Oberg said that if she were to test it now, that she could exclude it, right? Yeah. Oh yeah. So he's done. Brad says, all right. Um, Brad Weber, his Sig Sauer, as it stands right now, was not excluded, correct? He's like, I don't know. And this is my favorite question of the day. He's like, you know what's really interesting? He's like, that's interesting. He's like, that's interesting. So you say that he had reviewed that Brad Weber had reviewed his text messages to determine that he had been driving his van that day, right? Is that's what you said when Nick was asking you that question? So it's interesting because why would he be reviewing his text messages about whether or not he had driven his van after you called him if he didn't know what he was going to be talking about? That was mic drop time. It was mic drop time. I mean, he got him. He nailed him right there. Just nailed him. And Mullen's answer is like, that is interesting. He's like, I have no explanation. That is interesting. Oh, we got a cash app? Oh, sweet. Oh yeah, I see I got a little bit of Venmo love too. I'll give you all the love. I'll give you all the love. Did you give all the love out to the Venmos yesterday? Like our homie Laura hit us with $100 Venmo. Hope you gave her the love. All right, so that was just glorious. McClellan didn't even touch it on his recross. He just said so. The gun tech did not reach the same conclusion on Brad Weber's gun as she did with Richard Allen's, right? And he's like, that's correct. That's it. So jury questions: which direction does the the trail cam face? He says, well, west and a little bit south. So he's like, if the crime scene is over here, the camera's facing this way. So it's basically the opposite direction. And Baldwin says, does the trail cam show from from whence people were traveling? He used the word whence. I like it when he does that occasionally. It's enjoyable for me. He said it could show it from like north to south or west to east, but you're never going to see beyond that. Like you can see if they're coming from like behind it and down to in front of it, they're going from north to south or east to west if they come in frame coming from one way or the other, but beyond that, no. Um, and then he says, so McClellan clarifies, he's like, so the crime scene is out of frame of the trail cam. He says, correct. And then question 2, if you saw someone on the trail cam, could you identify what they were wearing? He says, yes. This is like the 20 questions, babe. It's like the trail cam 20 questions by the jury. So the trail cam, is it possible to see anything on the ground? And he says, yes. He's like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like kind of in layers. It's like you kind of see like up high and then in the middle and then on the ground. I'm like, oh, so it's like a photograph. You can see like the whole thing. So he says, could you see the bodies? He says, no. And it says that so Libby German's phone stopped at 2:32. Uh, do you believe that that is when she died or they died? He says, yes. Question 5, does law enforcement use hollow point bullets? Or I'm sorry, rounds? Yes. Do you have uh were you able to identify the person on the trail cam? I thought I asked Caitlin, who's a reporter who was sitting in front, like they have a little closer to the sound. I'm like, who did you get? Like for the dude, because I couldn't understand what he said. And I got Harmon Foster, Andrea got somebody else, and Lee got somebody else. Lee was like, I got like Farmer or something. I'm like, and Andrea had something else. I was like, I'm gonna go with the girl in the front row because she had the closest to the sound. So like the name I came up with was a guy named Harmon Foster. Not 100 on it, but that's what I heard. Um, as a law enforcement officer, how hard is it to be accurate to ID a vehicle that you have seen while you're driving by at a fast speed? And he says, "Well, in my training experience, I find that people are very accurate with it. Very accurate." Um, would you expect a person in that particular situation with a person driving quickly by to be able to perfectly ID a vehicle while driving? Says depends on the person. It's a fair answer. All right. So the next they call Tobe Leesenby, former Carroll County Sheriff, did not play a major role. How many individuals did you think were involved in the murders? He's like uh, initially it was more. He's like after Allen, how many people involved? He's like after Allen, it was one. He says, "Can I refresh your recollection?" Hands him his deposition from August of 2023. "Sir, what did your deposition say?" He said, "Oh, my deposition, I said," he's like, "and I just want to be clear, this is after the arrest of Richard Allen." He says, "Right. Multiple. I thought it was multiple people, or at least two." So he said, "This is months after Richard Allen has been arrested. You're the former sheriff of Carroll County, and you believe that more than one person was involved." He says, "Yes." He says, "Who else believed that there was more than one person?" Objection, McClelland, sidebar. She allows it, or the the recollection has to be refreshed. He's like, "Who else was it?" He's like, "Well, it was Tony Liggett." So both the former sheriff and the current sheriff thought it was more than one person that committed this crime, and still do. So, uh, and then Nick asks a foundation question. He's like, "Were you aware of the feelings of the others?" He's like, "Did you know what other people believed at the time of the death?" And he was kind of like, "Well, yeah, I mean, we talk." Obviously, cops talk. It's a ridiculous question. I mean, who's going to be talking about a crime like this more than cops trying to solve it? Wow. Wait a second. 1,000 watching and 580 likes. All right, I'm just shutting it down. Y'all got nothing for me. Kidding. Come on. It's free. It's free. It's free. It's free. Hit that like for us. We'll appreciate it. We'll love you so much. All right. So August of 2023. So what do you believe? The answer. I just believe that it was more than one person. So 5 years of knowledge. Still, you still thought that the crimes were conducted by more than one person. Yep. Why did you think that? It was based on the totality of the information provided. Done. McClelland, you weren't really heavily involved. Like, so this is more shitting on his own cops. So you weren't really like you were the sheriff. So you weren't heavily involved in the investigation, correct? That's correct. Like that was it. Baldwin says, "You were the sheriff, right? The sheriff, right?" Says, "Yes." It's like I don't know. Am I crazy or does that just play off like unbelievable? Jury questions. How many murders have you investigated in your career? Tobe. How many do you guys think? Give it to me right now. Five, four, three, two, one. Y'all are too late. Zero. Zero. All right, so that was it. That was it for the day. Then we had 4 quick motions. There was a transport order from inmates to the DOC. She had granted one for a inmate named Jesse James, the Jesse James, the same one. I mean, he's long dead, but they're going to roll his dead bones in Ferris Bueller style right into the courtroom. Uh, Brad told her, like, you can hold off. He's like, he's been working with the attorney general on it. If he needs him, all he has to give is 24 hours notice and he'll be able to get him here. He doesn't even need a court order. So that would dealt with that. The motion for the witness to appear remotely. This is Agent Poole. This is the TUI request. This is the guy who was the partner with the first guy that Allison told you about this morning, Goatee, the guy who stonewalled Ajay, basically, who was just refusing to admit that Brad Weber ever said that he was out working on his ATMs prior to coming home, changing his timeline completely. So she reads the rule. She says, look, like, this is what the rule is, that, that there's situations that it should be that 14C says it should be in person, except for good cause shown. And in that case, it could be remotely done. She says he's got a medical condition. They don't think he can fly. It could, like, his life could be in peril. She doesn't even think he could drive it. It's one of those things. He's down in Texas. It's a half an hour, we figure, at most. We have a judge here that's willing to get his Zoom set up. We'll put it on the big screen. It'll be great. Be great. And also, Baldwin stands up. And additionally, my client's fifth and sixth rights are at play here. He's got the right to confront. He's got the right to a fair trial. Like, let's do it. She denies it. Yeah, so when did you subpoena him? And she's like, we just found out about this in August. Okay, we're only in like August, September, October. She's like, well, we did it 3 or 4 weeks ago. She's like, so when? She's like, yeah, like the beginning of October. So like 14 days before trial. Well, yeah, the state has to go first. 3 weeks is not a crazy amount of time when we just got she denies it. Objects, McClelland objects. And he says, well, it's better for them to get it through Brad Weber. I'm like, on direct. So they got to try to get it through Brad Weber on direct. It's crazy. And then they have an argument about impeachment. She's like, you've been improperly impeaching people. You're supposed to and she goes through, in her mind, what is the only impeachment process. And then he's like, well, no, like, there's other ways to impeach people. Like, they could say something on the stand that's like incorrect, and then I can tell them that they said something, so like Andy kind of like made a very like at that point I could tell he was tired. It was a long day. And he's like, I'm tired. I'm like he literally said, I'm tired. It's been a long day. I'm just like, whatever. So then there's the third party. She ruled on it. Andy said he was gonna stand on his pleadings, which means he was not gonna argue it orally. He's just gonna stand on the words on the paper. He says, look, the door was open. They opened the door. The testimony of Dr. Kaur, Holman, Olahai, it's in. They were talking about the sticks. They talked about Elvis Fields spitting on, oh no, they didn't talk about Elvis Fields. He brought it up. He brought it up because, like, it's the nexus. It's the nexus. You've got a confession. It's the nexus. And he said the undoing. He's like we have a very different opinion. They think it's an undoing. We don't think it's an undoing. We don't know. Jury was excused at this point. Last witness, jury excused, and she ran through these. So the jury's never in the courtroom for these types of motions ever. They're always done outside the presence of the jury. If the jury's in there, like, they're even doing, I keep telling Allie, because she's like, well, why aren't you telling me what they're like? Because they're even doing the things where the juries are out of the room on sidebar, which I don't understand. Like, the sidebar is for the jury, not the gallery. So she's just running this case like it's a secret. It's a big secret case. And then, he said the Lieutenant Holman, his statement that it can't be more than one person because that's impossible because multiple people couldn't keep their mouth shut. So he's like, that's it. She's like, yeah. At the end of the day, she said the same shit. No nexus. I'm not seeing the nexus. It's like the law is very clear here in Indiana. Very clear. There has to be a nexus with admissible discovery. So there you go. So their most recent attempt, they're going to have to try to do it if they're still going to even do it. Um, they're going to have to develop it with offers of proof, but they haven't even sniffed it yet. So that was it. That was day 16, y'all. Between Allie and I know my woman came on twice because she's a champ. What a champ. She's a champ. All right, y'all. It's 1 o'clock. I got to get up in a few hours for Saturday court. Saturday court. Everybody loves Saturday court. I love you guys. Did I tell you all that? I think you guys are great. We had a great crowd. 12:50, 12:05. We got a late rush. Somebody must have ended. You guys are amazing. We thank you so. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna suck it up and I'm gonna thank all the thankers that deserve the thankings. All right, so I did get some. I hope Allie thanked ours from yesterday. I'm gonna just in case they didn't, I got some Venmos. Laura shot us $100. Allie, you were rocking the lunch lives, which she is. She's saving my life in more ways than one. Love the way you break down the law, Bob. You're pretty awesome too. Thanks. I always love that like backhanded second place compliment. I live there. I live in that world. Thomas M paid us $20. I appreciate what you and your wife are doing. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. Megan P, always give her mod, amazing human. Happy Halloween, Halloween candy fun, or fun. And thank you both for all you do. Lynn M paid us $10. All your amazing work to make this case to make sure this case doesn't stay in the dark. $10. Thank you so much. Kylie H paid you $10. Thank you for all you guys do. Monday morning coffee's on me. I love you. Much love to you and Allie. Thank you, Smiley Kylie. Beth R. Sorry, I almost doxed her. $50 holler yesterday. Thank you for your Delphi coverage. I look forward to seeing you and your and Allie's updates daily. Thank you very much. Jolene, I met you in the line today. It was awesome, awesome, awesome to meet you in person. I love that. And thank you for your constant support. She shot us another $20. Great to finally meet you, Bob. Yes, that was great. Melissa G paid us $10. Thanks for your dedication to this case and justice for all involved. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Melissa, for that $10 holla. Sylvia C paid us 20. Oh, God damn it. I'm sorry, Sylvia. $20 holla, Delphi truth. Truth, girl, truth. And then Mary L paid us $5. Love you both, but I'm pretty broke. It's the thought that counts. It really is. It really is. Like, please, if you guys are kind enough to donate, don't ever, ever, ever feel like you have to be like, oh, I wish I could give you like anything that you gift to us. We are incredibly grateful for. Believe me, it does multiple things. It helps us like keep this show going. It lets us know that you love us enough to give till it hurts, and that's all that matters to us. So we're super grateful for all of it. Oh, let me check the Cash App real quick. I did hear that change thing. I guess I must have turned the notifications on. Whoa, dang! Somebody just murdered. Like, whoa, wow, $200 Cash App. Love ducking felonies, a wrongfully convicted due process watcher. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I think that's the biggest one we ever got. That's beyond. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. That's amazing. Thank you. Um, and then Marcy slipped us 50. Thank you so much. You guys are incredible. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So thank you guys so much. All right, let me go through, see if hopefully I got to your questions. If they're rant related. Oh, wait, it looks like we got, I don't know what this is. I don't know if we got a PayPal. Oh, Dale, $100 PayPal. Hey, Bob, I very much appreciate all you do in Delphi. FYI, Lauren and Dr. John did a live before trial suggesting RA was very good suspect because there was a past DV incident, and that RA may have had an attraction to his daughter. Outlandish speculation that will never be corrected. I was in their Patreon for 2.5 years. Oh, damn it. Um, and I've seen them do this before. Very much appreciate all that you do for all of us. Where the heck can I see the rest of the story? Ugh, dang. I'm trying to open the whole story up and it's like screwing up on my phone. I feel you, Dave. Yeah, I heard like Allie and I actually listened to that one before Lauren came out. It's a little shocked. They've taken the hardline guilter route, man. I mean, thank you so much for that incredible gift. You guys have been incredibly generous tonight. Wow. But like blew my mind right now. Like my mind blown. All right. So Amanda gifted one DD podcast membership. Thank you so much, Amanda. The Sweet Lou, no member. Family hug. Love you. Welcome to the family. Can you describe the courtroom setting? People, anything unusual? The mood? Yeah, the courtroom packed every day. A lot of law enforcement, and I'm glad you brought that up because there is an absolute power. It's like it's a power play in there. They are packing that courtroom for this jury to see just a room full of cops as if they've got Hannibal Lecter. Like they're just shy of putting the mask on them. Like that's the only way I can contemplate it. There's like in the presence, the law enforcement presence is like growing daily. Like the back seemed to me like it was they all look like suited cops, which always means feds to me. So I don't know. Like they looked like there were feds back there. There was a cluster of them in the corner back there. Of course, you got all of them over there, like counsel's table. You got Holman over there and Mullins over there. You got a couple more in the back row. It's like it's a cop free for all in there. Um, I find that unusual. But the mood, like everybody's like as toxic as this thing is, everybody in that courtroom is well behaved on the daily, you know. And I've got like mortal enemies in there, and everybody like short from Greeno, like screaming at me that I was a liar in open court. That's the only kind of off thing that happened. Don Burke gifted 10 DD podcast memberships. Thank you, always giver Don. We love you so much. We love you, love you, love you. Jason McClellan, thank you so much for that DD gifted podcast membership. You're amazing. We appreciate you. We love you spreading the love. It's awesome. Cheerful new member. Family hug. Love it. What is RA doing while confessions are playing? Like sitting there normally listening. Like I don't know what other people are saying about Richard Allen, but he looks completely normal. Like he's like, there is no way to make a good face at trial. Like there is no like, what is your normal? He spends an awful lot of time looking back at his wife. Like he loves his wife. He looks at her all the time. All the time. Like this is like he looks at Kathy 50 to 100 times a day. Like, and that's probably underestimating it, and he's making like actual eye contact. Like it's like it's meaningful eye contact that he's making with her. Like the other day, he threw her a wink. Yeah, it's like it's different than I've seen him in 2 years. So um it's $1 million question, Lee. I have no idea. Like they shouldn't have been, they really shouldn't have been. Where's the heat seeking drone footage? I don't know. Their case is done, Wendy. You tell me. I have no clue. Gen P 13.99. $14 hollow will be back. Andrew, you got me first tonight. You have me tomorrow. There's plenty of room for all of us here. Plenty of room. Plenty of room. Like, it's like we're gonna see different shit. I mean, we're very much on the same side of it. So you're gonna be hearing, I'm sure, similar rants. I've just been doing it for a lot longer. She's where I'm at, like where I was at early. Like he's like, I at some point I'm like, oh my God. It's like I kind of like after a year and a half of ranting, and then we hit the lull, and people are like, wait, is Bob still covering? I'm like, yeah. Like there's nothing going on now. It's like I've ranted it all. Now I just have to wait for trial. Now that I've heard the state's case in chief, it's done. It's full rant mode. I'm back into full rant mode. So, there was a lull. I had been following it for a year and a half. Every pleading, every hearing I was there, I ranted. You guys heard it all. It's like there's no need to rant about what other creators are saying because I don't give a shit. Like that doesn't matter to me. Like whatever the other people are saying. It's like that's not what I'm about on this channel. Like I'm about the law. I'm about our rights. I'm about defense attorneys. I'm about educating you guys about what defense attorneys really do because the people that hate defense attorneys don't know jack shit about what we do. Because as soon as I tell every single person that's like, I hated defense attorneys until you explain to me what you actually do, they're like, now I kind of love defense attorneys against my better judgment. So it's like that's what we're about over here. We're trying to kick the knowledge, man. Just let you know what's up. Salty Sweet Caroline. Ah, hugs, family hugs. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you in the fam. Uh, Alicia, Tennessee gal here, not familiar with Delphi, but would it be possible for perps to flee a crime scene via the waterway? Be tough. It's pretty shallow, but not impossible. Not impossible. It's actually a pretty interesting thought. Afton, love you. Mods. Oh, and so I don't forget, because I'm going to be getting off real quick after I'm done this. Thank you, mods. I love you. It's late. You're amazing. You've been working all day. I think Allie did 2 lives today, and then I'm keeping you up all night. You guys are the bee's knees, like for real. I adore you. Thank you so much. Couldn't do it without you guys. Helen, have missed something? Why is the defense putting up hostile witnesses? I mean, they're going to have to. They have to put up cops because the real answer to your question, so I don't short shift it, is that when McClelland put them on, he had them testify to very narrow topics, meaning that he was not allowing them to just sit up there and testify about the whole investigation like you see in most trials, because that gives the defense. That's where you're going to see the hour, 2.5 hour, 3 hour cross examination by defense attorneys where they can dig into all the stuff. He's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to narrow it down to bloop. I'm going to put them on for this, and I'm going to pull them off. I'm going to put them on for this, and I'm going to pull them off, because then he can make the beyond the scope objection when the defense starts getting into things that he doesn't want them to get into. Linda, $20 holler. Could RA testify that Odin's guards threatened him into making false confessions? And would that allow the defense to bring in the evidence for the Odin theory? It's a great question. It's a great question, actually. I mean, the lawyers are barred from doing it. I don't know how she's barring the defendant from saying it. Like, I honestly don't. I don't know how that would play out. That's a really good question. It's so dangerous to put him on though, like because you just don't know like how he's going to react up there. As normal as he looks, I'd still be very, very leery of doing it. Like always, I always am. Why no search dogs? They had no real answer for it. Had no real answer for it. They were waiting. I actually talked to somebody who was formerly in that office, and he gave me the straight dope on it. Um, he tried. He tried to get them to get some dogs down there, but other people knew better or not. Will the trial audio be available if Andrea's writ works? It will be. So we're all rooting for that. That'd be awesome. So yeah, she busted her ass to get a writ done to try to get the audio. And like, I have zero hope that we're going to get it heard to where we're going to be able to see the exhibits during the trial. But hopefully that writ kicks ass so that we can, because she's right. I mean, we were talking about today. She's like, I didn't even feel like I really needed to cite cases. I did just because that's what I do. But the law is clear, and she's right. It is. Like, I mean, she has absolutely no right to stop us from getting the audio for that trial. So, um, question: can Gull see the transcripts after the trial's over? Yeah, I mean, they're going to order them. They're going to have to do it for appeal. They're going to, if he's convicted, they're going to have to get them all up. If he, like, I'll tell you right now, if he's acquitted, we're gonna have to form a GoFundMe to get them printed out. Like, I'm sure we'll have no problem. We'll have no problem putting some money together between all the creators to like get those things ordered up and get the transcripts. Um, Crypto tax lawyer, $20 holla. Appreciate you always, crypto. We know you must be exhausted. Sincere thanks for the sacrifices. UAB lawyer Lee. There's a larger reason you're in Delphi right now. I like to think so, man. Like I got onto this case, and I like to think that there's a reason I did, you know. So and it's all coming to a culmination now, which is fulfilling. Um, Laura 4181. Did anyone know they were on the bridge? No. I'm sorry, like Laura, I don't understand the context. I was probably deep in it. Did anyone like for some of the later ones, or you were asking them like 2 hours ago? I'm probably gonna. Does Kathy get to visit Rick during this trial at all in the evenings? No, it's calls. She's not seeing him. Seeing him in the courtroom, which frankly is probably better than in the jail anyway. Like they're 10 feet from one another. Has Gulliver made one favorable defense decision? Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, don't you remember? She granted the cameras in the day that she bum rushed him out of the case. Criminal network. Was it erased? Was it recorded over, or did the DVR malfunction? It can't be all of them. I feel you. It's hard to know. They've used all those excuses at some point. Bear Jew, shout out to Underachiever. $2 holla. Appreciate it. Helen, Mandy Joe. Oh, I love being here. Bob is the one who brought this case to everyone's right from the start, before anyone else did, showing us something was wrong with this case. True story. Thank you, Helen, for the comment. Bear Jew, are we coping again? Don't know what it means, but I appreciate the $2. Thank you, Bear Jew. Amanda, another $10 holla. Appreciate you so much, Amanda. Take the Delulu bishes. Did Rick really search long nipples on preteen? I don't know. I did not see that on what got posted in the what Allie sent me, or Dizzy sent me, or Mandy, one of the girls sent me what they saw the searches. I did not see the long nipples on preteens. Sadie, there was a massive amount of evidence lost. I thought it was a couple of interviews. No, way more than that, Sadie. A huge amount. Huge amount. How far back was the original interview that's lost? Well, hopefully I answered those questions for you. Like they were from the first 3 days of the investigation. The original, like, you know, that show, the first 48 hours, the critical time. They lost all that shit. That's right. That's this case. Kasha, our plea offers public record. No, they're not. Like all that bullshit about like the prosecutors and all those people. Why are they? He's gonna plead out. No, you know who told you he wasn't? Me. He's never pleading out. I mean, they like, yeah, no, they don't like plea offers, not like, so those are not out for public consumption. I asked this question with reservation, with the utmost respect for the families, but how do the families of Libby and Abby seem to be reacting to the evidence? I mean, I think they think the case is going well. I mean, they have all their faith in law enforcement in McClellan. So, I mean, they're hoping against hope that he's the right guy and that they get a conviction. Question, Bob, can the defense in closing statements say they psychologically tortured him or similar? I mean, they can argue it. They can argue it. Did the jurors take notes? Because that is interesting. I don't know which part you're talking about, babe. Dean Johnson, what does Gull have to gain for acting like this? No clue. Is Gull still holding back juror questions? No, she's reading most of them. I mean, if they don't comply with the law, they don't read them. They didn't show the video to the jury. Nope, not today. It's coming. Babe, you're asking an awful lot of questions. You could text me. Okay, skipping your last one. I love you so much, but nope. Michelle, $20 holla. Let Kathy and Rick know that we're behind them all the way. I will. All right, you guys rock. I love you all. You're amazing. I hope you guys get some sleep. We'll be back tomorrow. Saturday morning court. Yeah. Love you guys. 'Cause without you, just an old man talking about a lot of cases. Talk at you mañana.